Good morning, everybody, including those people watching the proceedings of this meeting webcast. I welcome you all to the full council, Salford City Council meeting. First of all, we're going to have civic prayers, and today that's going to be conducted by Reverend Christine Threlfall of the parish of St James's in Broughton. So over to you, Reverend Christine.
Thank you so much, and good morning to you all. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, I thank you for everyone present in this meeting. I thank you for all who commit their lives and their work to public service. I pray your blessing upon them. I pray that you will continue to bless them with wisdom, passion, clarity of thought and good judgment. That you will continue to bless them with your care for every person in this world. And we particularly pray for the people of our beautiful city of Salford, that they will be well cared for, continue to be cared for with good judgment, with real care by all members of this council. Pray for them, pray for their families who give up so much. Serve the city. Doing so. May we all work for justice, for each other. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. As I said earlier, good morning, everybody. This is quite a different council meeting to the one that we would normally have, but these are very different times that we're living in. Our world has changed because of virus that we can't see, but we have felt its impact. There's been so much incredible good work, so many great acts of kindness and good deeds, and so much of the spirit of Salford shown in supporting our different communities in the city of Salford over the past few months. It makes me very proud that my adopted city have come together, and I'd like to thank everybody who's been involved in the helping and who is going to continue helping at these difficult times. That's really important because we're not over the virus yet. Alongside these good works, there has been a time of very great sadness because there are so many Salford families and friends who have lost loved ones due to the coronavirus. And recently came the very sad and tragic news of 14-year-old Adam Kay, who suddenly died. We'd like to pray for everybody that I've mentioned. We'd like to be able to turn our thoughts and our minds to the families as we silently remember and send our thoughts and prayers with them. I'd like also to dedicate this time to ex-councillor and ex-ceremonial mayor, Mr. Eric Burgoyne, who sadly passed away in March this year. So can we let the minute silence begin, please? Thank you. Thank you very much for joining me in that minute silence. This meeting is normally our AGM, which would be followed by the mayor making. Unfortunately, that's not been able to arrange because of the social distancing that is in operation at the minute. What we'll do is we will find an appropriate time where we can have that mayor making meeting, and hopefully people who will attend will be able to enjoy the whole experience. So getting on with the meeting then, do we have any apologies for this morning's meeting?
We only have the one apology, and that's a potential one, Councillor Ray Mashiter, who may be joining us later on.
Councillor McIntyre, Ceremonial Mayor, if I may now read out the councillors that are present at the start of this meeting.
Yes, please.
Councillor Antrobus, Councillor August, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Barnes, Councillor Bellamy, Councillor Bentham, sorry, if you could just bear with me, Councillor Kamel, the City Mayor, Councillor Clark, Councillor Cohen, Councillor Collinson, Councillor Corin Caesar, Councillor Critchley, Councillor Dawson, Councillor Dickman, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Fletcher, Councillor Karen Garrido, Councillor Robin Garrido, Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Hesling, Councillor Hines, Councillor Humphreys, Councillor Jolly, Councillor Kelly, Councillor King, Councillor Lancaster, Councillor Leitner, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Linden, Councillor Mashiter, Councillor McCusker, Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Merry, Councillor Morris, Councillor Mullen, Councillor Nelson, Councillor Paula Bushell, Councillor Bevitt, Councillor Reynolds, Councillor G Reynolds, Councillor N Reynolds, Councillor Saunders, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Turner, Councillor Wade, Councillor Walker, Councillor Walsh, that's Joan Walsh, Councillor John Walsh, you could just bear with me, sorry, Councillor Ward, Councillor Warmishan, Councillor Warner, Councillor Weir, Councillor Wheeler, Councillor Wilson, and that concludes the list. Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Can I just confirm that when you were scrolling down, you missed a few councillors off at the start?
Councillor Birch and Councillor Brocklehurst have put notes in the chat box to say that they're here and they weren't mentioned.
And Councillor Brooks as well.
Thank you.
If I can clarify, I think the only people that are not here or not giving apologies are Councillors Goulden, Jones and Ryan. Everybody else is accounted for.
Thank you very much. Are we ready to go forward?
Yes.
Item number 3, the declaration of interest. Do members have any personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interests that need to declare at this meeting? If so, please declare them now. Item number 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of January and the 26th of February 2020. These minutes seem to be a true and accurate account of those council meetings held on the 15th of January and the 26th of February. Can we approve those minutes, please?
Approved, Chair.
And seconded?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 5. We'd asked Shan Roxburgh, the City Solicitor, to present a report with details proposed alterations and amendments to the City of Council's constitution, particularly to the outstanding orders relating to the conduct of meetings as a result of COVID-19 emergency, after which I'll ask members if they'd like to ask questions. So over to you, Sian.
Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor. This report, as you state, amends the Council's constitution and seeks to recommend that the Council makes 5 recommendations to approve interim changes to the Council's constitution as detailed in the report and appended. These revisions will apply until the 6th of May 2021 unless they're rescinded by the Council at an earlier date. The 5 main sections that are to be amended are the Council's procedural rules and standing orders, the Access to Information Procedure rules, scrutiny procedure rules, code of conduct for members, and the protocol, planning protocol for members and officers. We are also seeking agreements that the versions of the above sections that were previously in force will automatically come back into the force on the 7th of May 2021 unless the Council rescinds the interim sections at an earlier date. We also have a remote meetings protocol to take us through the COVID pandemic period, which we are seeking approval of, which would last until the 6th of May 2021 unless otherwise rescinded. And we're also seeking approval for amendment to the employment procedural rules, which I'll outline in more detail in due course, regarding the appointment of political assistants. And finally, to approve amendments to the scheme of delegation of non-executive functions to chief officers to change the role of the senior information responsible officer from the city solicitor to the Assistant Director of Strategy and Performance. So the background to this matter is that there are interim time-limited changes proposed to our constitution aimed at assisting with the effective operation of remote meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic. We also have some changes to the Officer Employment Procedure rules to take account of political assistance, and this is cross-referenced in a later report this morning, which will be presented in relation to political assistance presented by our Chief Executive. And also there's the final change in the CIRO responsibilities. By way of further background, it's a legal requirement that the Constitution has to be regularly updated, that the Council has a Constitution and it's up to date. It's part of my role as City Solicitor to monitor and review and make recommendations on necessary amendments, the last amendments being in November of 2019. There are a number of appendices attached which detail the proposed amendments to standing orders, access to information rules, scrutiny, planning and code of conduct. And those appendices mark out clearly in bold in the report that's been published the changes to proposed. Essentially, in relation to the changes in relation to remote meetings, the Coronavirus Act, Section 78 of the Coronavirus Act 2020, provided for regulations to change the way in which we conducted our meetings, for example, in terms of frequency, place, time, and the manner in which people could vote, and also issues relating to inspection of documents and public access to meetings, etc. The regulations essentially state that they allow for members to attend meetings remotely due to the impracticalities, due to social distancing, restriction on travel and so forth. It means that we cannot currently carry out our meetings under business as usual. So this section of the Act allows for members to attend meetings remotely, to hear and, where practically, be seen by other members' attendants and the public. There's no longer a requirement for local authorities to hold annual meetings, although we have obviously decided to do so this morning. And there's obviously modification in relation to public access and press access to meetings. So a number of meetings have already taken place remotely in relation to the council business. And we're not actually officially required to amend our standing orders because there is legislative provision to allow us to conduct meetings remotely under Section 5 of the 2020 regulations. However, it is good governance practice that we formally amend our standing orders on a temporary basis. This will avoid the risk of challenge or reduce the risk of challenge, ensure that our meetings are held in an efficient and effective manner. There's also a small number of minor revisions in the Constitution that don't relate to remote hearings, but they cover clarification of cross-references and deletion of references to committees that etc. that no longer exist. The proposed remote meetings protocol forms a foundation as to how, for the sake of transparency, as to how remote meetings will take place, but that core procedural document may be slightly amended for different meetings in accordance to what's appropriate for that particular meeting. The provision in relation to political assistance is required under our office procedure rules because we had a brief reference to it in the past, but in accordance with the legislation, we're required to approve the appointment of political assistants at a council meeting, and we never previously had political assistants, therefore we didn't have the requisite detail required, hence the latter report and the amendment to our constitution. I think that concludes the main provisions of the changes, ceremonial mayor, unless anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. It was a very detailed report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can people please indicate whether or not they'd like to ask questions? And Councillor Saunders, you want to ask a question? Councillor Saunders.
Hi, yeah, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Chair and Shan, protocol number 3.4 clearly states that meetings may be held over several venues, including actual venues and virtual venues. I'm assuming that that is correct. In which case, and I'm saying this on my own behalf, not representing my group, but in that case, why can we not do what our colleagues in Parliament, in the House of Commons, are doing, and having a few people in the council chamber, possibly even in one or two other rooms, such as Salford Suite or one of the larger committee rooms, and the rest of the people dialing in virtually? And I think that would send a very, very positive signal and message to the residents of Salford. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders.
If I may respond through you, Chair. There is no legal requirement that we have to hold physical meetings. There's no bar on it, but there's no actual requirement. So that really is a matter for individual authorities. And I understand that there have been a number of councillors who have been shielding, and accordingly, that has not proved to be a pragmatic way forward thus far. But we would continue to keep our arrangements under review and monitored, Chair.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Sharp, you have a question.
Chair. Just in response to Councillor Saunders' question, the virtual meetings seem to be running quite well, and the staff that have been supporting the virtual meetings have done a very good job. I think the question more is, should Parliament be doing virtual meetings like us rather than us doing like Parliament? And the proper question is, though, are we going to continue these virtual meetings? Because on some of the meetings, it seems to be working quite well.
Thank you.
Chair, through you. I think the plan is, until further notice, to continue with virtual meetings. We're rolling out further meetings going forward now. We've had fantastic support from our IT department. We've started school appeals virtually now as well, which have been running very well. They started last week, and we've had very positive feedback from both panel members and parents. So as things seem to be working quite well at the moment, that is the plan going forward, to continue with virtual meetings, as we're still obviously in the pandemic period leading through to recovery.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay. The council is asked to approve the amendments at Salford City Council Constitution as detailed in the report and summarised in its recommendations. Do I have a proposer and a seconder for that?
Move it. Great.
Wonderful. Then it's agreed. Item number 6, the membership of committees and panels, including the appointment of chairs and deputy chairs for the municipal year 2020-2021. Can I ask the City Mayor to present the report which details the membership of these committees? City Mayor.
Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor. I know there's been some last-minute amendments to obviously some of the appointments on the committees and panels for the municipal year of 2020-21, but I'd like to move the report before full council and obviously note the membership of the committees and the panels. So I move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council is asked to approve revised membership of the committee, and before we go into that part, I should have asked if there was any questions. No. Then the council is asked to approve the revised membership of the committee's panels as detailed in the report, together with any additional ones, revisions report at the meeting. Do you have a proposer?
Yeah, move it.
A seconder?
Agreed. Yeah. Councillor Dawson. Yeah.
Agreed.
Wonderful.
Agreed.
Then that is agreed.
Chair, can I just interrupt? Councillor Fletcher has indicated to ask a question. I think it may have referred to the previous item, but could we check if Councillor Fletcher still wants to ask that question?
Councillor Fletcher.
It was just a brief question to Sean that these rules will stay in place regarding coronavirus until the 6th of May 2021. Unless they're rescinded beforehand. So who will make the decision to rescind? Will it be the City Mayor, the Cabinet, Sean? It was just a quick query.
If I may respond through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. There's a section in the report, my apologies, I should have indicated that. It will either involve a further report back to Council, or I also do have powers as monitoring officer within the council to make minor amendments, and that, as it has been made clear in the report, it might be possible that that's not deemed necessary to bring that back. There are two options there, and I think we'll probably review and monitor the situation as we went forward. I think it's a matter about making sure matters are communicated, so it would probably be good practice to bring a report back, just to ensure for visibility, the public and councillors, to ensure that people are aware that we have reverted back to business as usual, so to speak.
Okay,
Thank you, Shan. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Can we go back to the council's asked to approve the revised membership of committees, panels as detailed in the report, together with any additional ones or revisions to the report at this meeting? Do you have a proposer?
Yeah, move it, Chair.
A seconder?
Seconded, Councillor Dawson.
Then that's agreed. Item number 7, notification of appointment of Cabinet for 2020-2021. And again, I would pass to the City Mayor to present the report which details recent amendments to the Mayoral team, after which there will be questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. The City Council is asked to note the membership of Cabinet for 2021. I just want to draw colleagues' attention to a few amendments to the Mayoral team. Colleagues will know because I have already emailed all councillors to inform them of this. Obviously, there's been changes to the statutory Deputy City Mayor, which is now Councillor Tracy Kelly, who's also lead member for housing. Councillor Paula Boschel has taken on a new role in the mayoral team, leading on anti-poverty, neighbourhoods, financial inclusion and equalities. And Councillor Jim Kamel joins us as the Executive Support Member for Social Care and Mental Health. I'd like to pay a special thanks and appreciation to Councillor Jane Hamilton, who served in the mayoral team and who will continue as a mental health champion, working with Councillor Reynolds and Councillor Kamel in their respective portfolio. So these are the amendments before Council today. It's here for noting and approval. So I move the report. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Saunders, do you have a question? Okay then.
No, Chair, I don't know why you think I have. I haven't.
Because you popped up on the screen, that's why.
Oh.
You popped up on the screen, that's why.
Sorry.
Councillor asked to note the revised membership of the middle team. Do you agree?
Agreed, yeah. Agreed.
Thank you. That's all agreed then. Item number 8, appointment of representatives to outside bodies. And City Mayor, this comes back to you. Could you present the report detailing the appointments of representatives? Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. Again, this is the appointment of representatives to outside bodies for the 2020-21 municipal year. Colleagues will note there are some, roles that still have TBC by them. I'm just going to give colleagues an update on where we've got to with that. There is one amendment to outside bodies, and that relates to Salford Royal Foundation Trust. Currently, the paperwork says it's Councillor Linden who will be taking up that outside body appointment. It's actually going to be Councillor Wilson Nukurunziza. So if we can amend that accordingly, that would be appreciated. In terms of those that are to be confirmed, the Working Class Movement Library will be Councillor Sophia Linden, and Salford's Unemployed Resource Centre will be Councillor Damien Bailey. Those are all the amendments that I want to make to the paperwork before colleagues today. Again, this is here for noting, and Council are asked to agree the GMCA appointments and nominations as listed on pages 3 to 7 in this report, to note the AGMA nominations as listed on pages 8 to 10 in the report, and to note the appointment to outside bodies, those non-AGMA appointments on pages 11 to 13. Obviously, I move this report in light of the amendments already made before full council. Thank you.
Thank you, City Mayor. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can I, Councillor Dawson? Yeah, can I just ask a question? I've got one on, I'm down as the Booths charity. It has proved difficult attending some of the meetings, and I would like it to be noted that I would be quite willing that another councillor actually takes up this role. The reason I'm saying it now, this urgent, it's our meetings coming up in July. So I believe Councillor Joan Walsh would be willing to do to serve on the Booths charity. So it's just that I can't make the decision, but I just want to please have that noted.
City Mayor?
Yeah, just in responding to that, I'm more than happy to accept Councillor Dawson's request to come off that outside body and for him to be replaced by Councillor Joan Walsh. I'm happy to make that amendment in the paperwork as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
There's a question from Councillor Robin Garrido.
Councillor Robin Garrido.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to membership of outside bodies, is it right that we should actually be moving somebody who is the subject of an investigation by the Standards Committee?
Can I have some advice?
That is a matter which I've not had the opportunity as a new monitoring officer to fully consider yet. Obviously, we're in a changeover period from the previous monitoring officer and myself, and any outstanding standards issues are due to be reviewed, and we're not really in a position to comment on that at this point in time.
Thank you.
Can I come back on that, Sir Chair?
Councillor Mr. Garrido.
Yeah,
we're going to a point of order here, Chair. This is not for discussion. I want a point of order on that, not for discussion.
Yeah, standards issues, Chair, are a matter of confidentiality. They're not currently in the public domain at the moment.
Thank you.
Can I then come back on that then?
If there were any outstanding issues, it wouldn't really be an appropriate forum to discuss them publicly at present.
Okay, could I then come back, Chair? I would like to make it known, I think the rest of the Conservative group would probably be the same, that we would not be prepared to support at this stage a nomination for Councillor McCusker to the LGRU local government.
Chair, can we get this right? It's a point of order.
Could you go through chat, please, Councillor Dawson?
No, it's a point of order, Chair. You should not name people. It's a sensitive matter. You're breaking the rules.
I think I would agree with what you were saying, that it is a sensitive matter, but I'll get advice from Shan, the City Solicitor.
I don't think Councillor Garrido did actually name anybody's name specifically, unless I've missed something. But in any outstanding standards issues, if there were any outstanding investigations, they're not for discussion in the public domain. It's a matter of a confidential matter at this point in time.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes. Yes, Councillor Merry.
Councillor Merry. Yeah.
Yeah, I did ask a comment on the chat actually, because I just want to remind you, Ceremonial Mayor, of the principles of English justice, which is that people are innocent until found guilty, actually. And I would think that Councillor Robin Garrido would do well to remember that.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, we're asked to note.
I've down for a comment, Chair.
Sorry?
I've asked for a comment.
Councillor Robin Garrido.
Yeah, I purely ask, I'm not sure what Councillor Murray was talking about, but I really just want to make it clear, this has nothing to do with the previous question. This is in terms of the outside bodies, I'm not prepared to support a nomination for Councillor McCusker to that body. I want that. You have
mentioned a councillor's name again, and it's within a confidential matter investigation, and so I'd ask you not to do that a third time.
Chairman, it's not. I'm sorry. This isn't confidential. There's a nomination made in public on the agenda for Councillor McCusker for the
and you will have a chance to place your vote, either for or against when it comes to the vote. Shan.
Chair, may I, through you, remind Councillor Garrido that in any matter, and I'm not confirming either way, what investigations we currently have outstanding. If there are any investigations outstanding, people do have the right to a fair hearing if the matter is to proceed, and a fair investigation, and it's not appropriate for matters like this to be discussed in the public domain prior to any issues being resolved.
I'm sorry, Chair, I'm not discussing any issues. I'm sorry, I'm not discussing any issues. I'm purely stating that I do not wish to support Councillor McCusker as a nomination for the LGRU local government. And we're all being asked to vote on this.
Can I interrupt you to say that you've been advised on that matter, I've been advised on that matter, and I think we should proceed. Any other questions? Any other comments? Councillor Androbus.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the issue of members making sure that their video is switched off and not commenting until you, Mr. Mayor, have called them. Councillor Garrido has interrupted you a number of times, and I think that is not only contrary to the standing orders of our meeting, but it's also very rude behaviour, and I think it ought to stop.
Thank you, Councillor Androbus. Can we now then proceed to the vote? We have been asked to note and agree where appropriate that the necessary appointments, representatives of Salford City Council to outside bodies, as detailed in the report, together with any additional ones or revisions to the report at the meeting. Do I have a proposal?
Yeah, move it, Chair.
Second.
Second.
Any against? Nobody against? Then it's agreed. Item number 9, urgent decisions. Shan Roxburgh, the City Solicitor, is asked to present this report, which details key decisions taken in accordance with special urgency powers during the period March to May 2020, after which I'll ask members to pose any questions. Shan.
Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor. This report recommends that the Council's asked to note it. It's a key decision that is taken in accordance with our special urgency powers in the Constitution, and it's a decision that has been taken since the last meeting in March and the period from March to May 2020. The background to this relates to Rule 18 in our access to information procedure rules in the Constitution. It's a requirement of our Constitution to submit a report to the next suitable council meeting, providing details of any executive decision that was taken during the preceding cycle, which for reasons of urgency, it's not been possible to fulfil the normal requirements of publication. And instead, the matter's been dealt with under special urgency provisions. So this is an item which related to the current COVID-19 emergency pandemic. It was a decision taken by the City Mayor on the 24th of April 2020, and it was to support a key asset in Greater Manchester as a result of the pandemic. And it delegated authority to the Chief Executive, City Solicitor and Section 151 officer to carry out any actions necessary to give effect to the decision. The asset in question is of great strategic, economic and financial importance, not only to Salford, but to Greater Manchester and in fact the North West, and provides a significant amount of jobs to local residents. The legal or financial position of the council and interests of Salford would be prejudiced if the matter was not determined before the next scheduled council meeting where it could have been considered. I also wanted to confirm, Chair, that the decision maker obtained agreement from the relevant chair of the scrutiny panel that the decision related to, who agreed that the decision was urgent and could not reasonably be deferred. Notice this decision was also made available to the public, setting out the reasons for urgency, etc., as required under access to information procedure rules. Furthermore, the decision was overseen by not only the Section 151 officer, but myself as monitoring officer. And for legal and commercial reasons, further details of this decision and further surrounding circumstances were not published. I think that concludes my report unless there are any questions, Chair.
Are there any questions? We're asked to note the report and the decisions as detailed in that report. Do you have a proposal?
Yeah, move it, Chair.
Thank you. Seconder?
Yes, Councillor Dawson.
Thank you. Then that's noted. Item number 10 is the appointment of political assistants. I'm going to pass to Jim Taylor, Chief Executive, and ask him to make and present the report to the Council. So, Jim.
Thank you, Chair. So, as members will see, will have read the report. It sets out the background to the post of political assistance in local authorities from a legislative point of view. It talks about the scope of the role and the constitutional changes necessary to proceed with those appointments at Salford City Council. Members will note there is a draft protocol attached at Appendix 1, which is quite clear, which sets out the parameters of the role, and it also provides some certainty and guidance as to how the role could function. And this would ensure that the political assistants will be able to operate as to provide the support for members, which was envisaged when the role was created by Parliament, and avoids any potential conflict with any other officers of the council. The report is self-explanatory, but I would just take members to recommendation 1, is that the council is recommended to agree to establish for the duration of the current administration to May 2021 posts of political assistants, which are known as political advisors, to those political groups that qualify for such a post in accordance with Section 9 of the Local Government and Housing Act 1989. The appointment of any political assistant is to run to the annual meeting of council after each election year, and such appointment to be automatically renewed so long as the relevant group remains entitled to the services of that political assistant, or until the principle of appointing political assistants is changed by council. There is a section on next steps. If council were to move this, then Section 3 outlines that I would have discussions with the political groups on council to ascertain that they require those political assistants to be appointed, and the terms of those appointments with regard to full or part-time cover, and the rest of Section 3 outlines further detail on that. So I'll just leave the report at that point, Chair, and take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any questions?
There's a comment from the City Mayor.
City Mayor. City Mayor, you have a comment.
Hello, can everyone hear me? My laptop seems to be running really slow. There's a significant delay. I just wanted to make members of the council aware that following the publication of the papers for full council today, I did actually write to the Leader of the Opposition on the 10th of June in connection with this paper being tabled. I want to make colleagues aware that this paper has not been tabled at the request of myself or the Labour group. It's my understanding that this paper has been tabled at the request of the Conservative group on this council, who are looking to exercise their statutory rights under the Local Government and Housing Act 1989, which allows for the appointment of political assistants. I did write to the Leader of the Opposition, making aware that really we've got some real concerns about pursuing this at this point in time. Colleagues will be aware that over the last 10 years, the City Council has lost £211 million in cuts and unfunded budget pressures. 53% of central government core funding has been taken away from the City of Salford. And at the moment, looking at the impact of COVID-19, we're currently projecting a £38 million overspend, and that also includes the use of around £4 million worth of reserves. I did receive a response from the Leader of the Opposition to my letter and email, suggesting to me that the Conservative group were not aware of this entitlement under the Local Government and Housing Act 1989. I've, as colleagues know, been on the City Council for just over 8 years now, and many members of the Conservative group have been serving on this City Council for much longer than I have. And I was certainly aware that this was an entitlement, but I also thought that both the Labour group and the Conservative group thought that it's not wise, certainly in a period of austerity and now increasingly in terms of the impact of COVID-19, to pursue this course of action and to commit Salford taxpayers' money to further resources to support our political activity as respective groups. That's the position of the Labour group, and colleagues may want to comment on this. I just want to conclude by drawing colleagues' attention to the fact that at the moment I have a political assistant as the directly elected mayor of the City Council, and that, as colleagues know, was called by referendum of the people of Salford. It's the local authorities elected mayor and mayor's assistant, England Regulations 2002, that give rise to my ability to appoint an assistant. Whereas what we're talking about here is the statutory entitlement in the Local Government and Housing Act 1989 that allows groups on councils that have more than 10% of the seats on a given council to actually exercise their rights to appoint a political assistant. Now, I find it interesting, obviously in the middle of a pandemic, that the opposition are deciding to, exercise their statutory rights. And I guess, reading in between the lines, one might think that this is because they're doing terribly badly in the polls and they're wondering how they can rescue the political turmoil that's been created off the back of the Conservative Party's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. But that is only speculation on my part. Obviously, it's informed by what I read in the press and the media every day. But needless to say, our position is that we don't support this at this point of view, and we would seriously ask the opposition to reconsider pursuing this course of action, acknowledging that it's the opposition who's actually brought this paper to the council today in exercising their statutory rights. Those are my comments. Thank you very much, Ceremonial Mayor.
Thank you, City Mayor. Councillor Turner, I believe you wanted to ask a question or make a comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
You can, but I can't see you.
Well, perhaps that doesn't matter really. As long as you can hear me, City Mayor, the Chairman. Thank you for acknowledging that I wanted to make a comment. Can I start by saying that we are, as the City Mayor states, in very difficult circumstances with this terrible disease. And I, for one, would not want to make political capital out of the running of the government's actual running of this campaign. So I won't be making political comments on it. I can start by saying that I welcome the very detailed report that the Chief Executive and congratulate him and all the officers involved in producing it. It's very full. What amazes me, and the City Mayor's right, no one had ever told my group that we were entitled to such assistance. We could have certainly made great store of it. The City Mayor is correct. He did write to me when he found out. And he wrote to me actually in his capacity of leader of the Labour group, which is the first time I've received communication from him calling himself leader of the Labour group. Well, indeed he is. He wears two hats. He's the City Mayor and also he's the leader of the Labour group. He thought our entitlement now was ill-timed. Well, I would say to him, it's long overdue. It's about time. The City Mayor also said he felt that by my group having help with a political assistant, it would put his group, the Labour group, at a disadvantage. Well, his group have the same entitlement. Well, that doesn't stack up. For the last 31 years, it is my group that has not had to go without the help that we were entitled to. How can the group the City Mayor leads be disadvantaged when out of 60 members of this council, they hold 51 seats? We have a City Mayor, we have a leader, a Labour group leader, a political assistant paid out of the public purse. We have one other assistant, he informs me, that's paid out of your own purse. You've got probably 3 office staff, statutory deputy mayor, deputy city mayor, 5. You've got a whole host of tools there. You cannot claim that you're being disadvantaged. It's just nonsense to suggest that. It's perfectly clear that his group would not be disadvantaged. But more important, what it will do is help my members hold to account the City Mayor and his executive, and of course make sure that the people of Salford will be able to get a more balanced view of what the government is doing to make their lives better. It will be a real positive for Salford that we have much closer links with the government to promote the city. The sooner we get going on this, the better, and I look forward to meeting with the relevant officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Mary.
Yes, because let me put my okay. Well, I think if I was Councillor Turner, I would try and avoid commenting on the government's performance at this moment in time as well. So I don't blame him for trying to dodge any link with Boris and what Boris has been up to recently. I think what I would want to do is plead with the Conservative group, and I don't often plead with the Conservative group, to not go down this particular route, because all that's going to happen is that you're going to be taking £37,000 potentially from the Salford taxpayer for a political assistant that is actually designed to help and further your particular cause. Now, you are entitled to do it. I respect that, and you are entitled to do it under the law. There's lots of things that people are entitled to do under the law. Whether that is wise to do it or not is another matter. So, to be fair, right, I understand that Les feels the need of some help in terms of presenting the Conservative case across Salford. I think given their lack of success in the previous 31 years, I can understand why they might be desperate for some assistance. But if you're going to do it, why not do it at your own expense rather than at the expense of the people of Salford? And that's what I'm pleading with you to reconsider, and not take that money from the public purse, but to actually look at other ways of funding it.
Thank you, Councillor Merrick. Councillor Wade, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. I'm feeling a little bit ashamed this morning that a group of councillors are bringing their concerns about their needs to this meeting. I don't know how those needs have arisen, but I feel that we're elected to meet the needs of our residents. We've had 10 years of being forced by a Conservative government to reduce the council payroll, to make efficiencies, savings, economies, and we've reduced our services to our residents. I'd like to ask Councillor Turner, how do the Conservative councillors reconcile this proposal with the directives of their government? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade. Any more questions or comments? No? Then the Council is asked to note and agree where necessary the recommendations as detailed in the report. Do you have a proposal? A proposal?
Yes, propose it, obviously.
Yeah. And a seconder?
Second.
Second.
Then that's agreed and noted. Item number 11, COVID-19 in Salford, our first 3 months, a response statement from the City Mayor. Can I pass to the City Mayor, please?
Thank you very much. Chair and members of the Council, it's a pleasure to see colleagues and friends via this new way of working we've all been embracing during this time. Getting to grips with a very different way of working has certainly been challenging at times. And whilst it can't replace or replicate real human interactions, I'd certainly still like to pay my thanks and appreciation to those who've made this technological transition possible at this time. I first want to start my address by paying my respects to Eric Burgoyne, who sadly passed away on the 16th of March. Eric and his wife Val have been long-standing members of the Labour Party in Salford, making an enormous contribution to the Labour movement and the people and communities of our city. Eric retired from the City Council in 2016 and served the City of Salford as ceremonial mayor in the civic year of 2011-12. I know Eric will be deeply missed by his family, his friends, and many of us here at the City Council. Also, I know you will all join me in paying your respects and offering our sincere condolences to Adam Kay's family, friends, and loved ones following his tragic death on the 2nd of June at Clifton Country Park. The loss of such a young life has affected us all and is deeply saddening. And in a world of turmoil and sorrow at this time, I would also like to remember the 72 people who tragically lost their lives during the fire at Grenfell Tower, and those injured and their families and friends at this time. My thoughts and my prayers are with all the families and friends who have lost loved ones at this time. On Sunday, 3 years on from that horrific and tragic day, we lit up the Civic Centre here in Swinton. We lit it up in green in memory of all those who have tragically lost their lives, have been injured. And in solidarity with the families, the friends, the loved ones, and their local communities, we're committed to seeing justice and bringing some good from what has been a truly horrific and tragic issue. In Greater Manchester and elsewhere in the United Kingdom, we know that residents of high-rise blocks continue to experience stress and sometimes great financial hardship as a result of the need to make their homes safe. We owe it to them and every resident of a high-rise block to continue to do all we can to keep people safe in their homes and to work with central government to ensure that they honour their word and that the residents and leaseholders aren't financially liable for the industrial and regulatory crisis we're facing within the United Kingdom, whilst also ensuring that the works on non-compliant buildings are undertaken promptly and swiftly. Since the tragic fire at Grenfell Tower, which alerted the country to the dangers of different types of cladding systems, work has been underway to replace the cladding and implement a range of safety measures here in the city of Salford, including council-funded sprinkler systems on 9 of our tower blocks in Pendleton. A great deal of work has been taken place through the 3 years to protect our residents. And as you may be aware from Councillor Merry, the proposed safety works from the tower blocks have finally after 3 or more years received government approval following what has been a very detailed and complex technical, legal and commercial process. Personally, I remain hugely disappointed by the government's response throughout this process, which has led to a slower pace in the implementation of the programme of safety works. And members of this council will know only too well, as we called an urgent full council meeting to agree it, that this city council offered to loan £25 million to fund works to remove and replace the non-compliant cladding as soon as possible. But unfortunately, the government blocked us from doing this because it was a PFI contract. Incidentally, the PFI was also signed off by the government in 2013. And in addition to this, the tight restrictions that have been placed on the £600 million of the government's ACM remediation funds, initially launched in 2016, has meant that our PFI contract did not qualify for this support, which has only added to what has always been a complex situation, which has taken a ridiculous amount of time, really, to resolve and get to the position where we are now. So, on the one hand, whilst I'm relieved that the replacement of cladding can now formally proceed, I'd seriously like to pay tribute to the residents who have bared with us through this entire crisis and have had to live under these exceptionally frustrating and challenging circumstances over the past 3 years. Who would have thought that a private finance initiative, a financial instrument that governments have so readily embraced as part of the supposed private sector efficiency or new public management mantra, would have caused such frustration and bewilderment in our city? And I sincerely hope that this news of government sign-off and the commencements of works on the tower blocks will provide some comfort to the residents that progress is now finally being made. Turning now to the coronavirus pandemic, from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to say thank you to every resident of our city for the way they have all responded to such difficult and challenging times. It is the people of our city and our inherent concerns for their welfare which represents the spirit of Salford. My thoughts and prayers remain with all of those affected by this cruel virus, which has taken from us much loved friends, family members, loved ones, and colleagues. I myself was struck by COVID-19 symptoms, and that in some respects gave me time to reflect on the impact of this virus on so many people across our country and indeed the world. There are so many sad stories. Councillor Lewis was telling me the other day about Hilda Churchill, who sadly passed away on the 28th of March, just 8 days before her 109th birthday. Born in 1911, the grandmother and matriarch of her family survived 2 world wars and the Spanish flu, but sadly passed away after contracting coronavirus. My thoughts and my prayers are with the family at this time. I felt it was important to have full council today to give us all an opportunity to reflect on the lives that have tragically been lost over the last 3 months and to bring together the actions of the City Council and others that have been absolutely amazing in terms of supporting our residents and the most vulnerable within our city. The report before members of council today outlines in detail the work that has been done since lockdown began on the 23rd of March. And I'd like to thank all of the officers and pay tribute to our policy and research team that have been instrumental in pulling that work together so we can communicate more fully to the residents of the City of Salford and to you as elected members in this virtual council chamber. The Spirit of Salford network and helpline was launched within days of the coronavirus lockdown to support vulnerable residents in our city. This saw volunteers, councillors, council employees and partner organisations such as Salford Community and Voluntary Services working together to help those in need. And as of the 12th of June, the hotline has received 10,283 telephone calls, along with 1,357 requests for support through the online web form. And the network has delivered over 3,000 food boxes to those in need within our city. Today, we pay tribute to each and every one of those people who've got behind that network. They are truly the spirit of Salford. There are so many people and organisations I'd like to thank today for their time, their compassion, and their deep-rooted commitment to the people of our city. Organisations such as Connect Youth and Community Centre that swapped lunches for virtual arts, crafts and singing and phoned and sent cards to their members who live alone. Dancing with Dementia volunteers delivered cooked meals to group members and PPE and toiletries to care homes. Social Adventure volunteers have cooked 600 meals a week for NHS frontline staff, providing childcare for key workers, delivering food parcels and supporting local families. The Belt and Road Association, which represents over 100 Greater Manchester-based Chinese companies, have donated over 120,000 face masks to the City of Salford, helping us with our PPE in this really challenging time. And also our own Councillor Bellamy, who I'm sure we've seen on social media, who's been using her catering skills to support residents by preparing 600 meals per week during this pandemic. We've effectively created our own localised welfare system in the city, catering to those missed out by the government's shielded list. And it's truly an astonishing feat. It's been made possible through the hard work of our officers, our local councillors, health professionals, local businesses, and importantly, with the enthusiasm and commitment of Salford's residents and our voluntary sector. Frontline workers, volunteers, charity workers, people who look out for their neighbours, those ensuring regular bin collections are maintained, those leaving thank you notes for essential workers or doing something for your community. You are all our heroes. And in times of crisis like this, it becomes clear how much society relies on things and people, which we often take for granted. Never before in my lifetime has the national spotlight shone so much on the people who empty bins, those who look after our vulnerable, those who volunteer, those who work in supermarkets and transport goods, and many, many more essential roles that hold society and our communities together. Until a vaccine is available, then testing, tracing, self-isolation, in some cases, will remain part of all of our lives, as will social distancing and restricting contact for vulnerable people. The spirit of Salford is exactly what this great city is about. But beyond our incredible local response, there is a rockier national picture ahead. Britain has the highest per capita COVID-19 death rate in the world at 62.5 per 100,000. Our lockdown has been, in many respects, an international joke, undermined through a mixture of hypocrisy from our leaders and those around them, often unworkable and poorly communicated advice and guidance, and seemingly an ideological disinterest in protecting the most vulnerable within our communities. Aptly highlighted by the government's U-turn only yesterday, following Marcus Rashford's successful public campaign on the summer food voucher, which tragically highlighted that 200,000 children have skipped meals during the lockdown in England. Fair Share UK are currently distributing 3 million meals per week to those in need. And we currently have 1.3 million people in England, children in England, registered for free school meals. Our government decided to lock down at least 2 weeks too late. And at that time, seemingly, they were committed to a policy of herd immunity rather than managing the infection rate directly. And after horrendous bungled communications, an apparent absent Prime Minister, and what seems like completely bungled advice, what remained of lockdown is disintegrating fast. Our response to this pandemic has been amongst the worst in the world. And from the perspective of local government, it already appears that the blame game in government has already begun. Government commissioned a CQC investigation into why hospitals had discharged COVID-19 patients early into lockdown, only to be reminded that their own guidance and advice to hospitals instructed that exact policy. Ministers mysteriously wrote out to all directors of public health last month, informing them that they're responsible for the rollout of testing, contact tracing, and infection control schemes, over which they're not given access to all the testing data routed through the national laboratories, and a limited say in the implementation of this or any role in the process. Salford's localised response to the pandemic has been phenomenal. Before government launched their national portal for care home testing on the 11th of May, 49 days after lockdown started, we were testing care staff and care home residents through our laboratory in Oldham and our pop-up facility via the AJ Bell Stadium. Early cases of COVID-19 were relatively high in Salford, with our first case being identified on the 15th of March. The 15th of March was before the government decided to lock down the country. And we believe many factors played into this. We know the virus has had a greater impact on BAME communities, and we know that there's a connection between infection rates and structural inequalities, or what we often refer to as poverty. But we also believe that our initial high cases were influenced by our prompt local testing and single GP service for our care homes. These successes were cast into stark relief by Matt Hancock's publicity stunt in early May, after government decided on the 12th of March to halt community testing and contact tracing, with Hancock overestimating the numbers of tests by as many as 40,000 in order to hit his target of 100,000 per day, sending swabs over to the United States of America for testing because lab capacity constraints, and issuing home testing kits, whilst changing the language from tested to actually having the capacity to test. The spin, in my opinion, was a signal of a desperate government clinging on to their reputation in the face of cabinet sharks looking for an easy scapegoat. Government communication with us as a local authority, in my opinion, has been incredibly poor. Last month, it was reported that the government had quietly withdrawn its much vaunted everyone in policy, following advice to local authorities to do whatever it takes to house those sleeping rough on our streets. And without warning or redress, civil servants informed officers at the combined authority that we'd need to return to previous arrangements, whilst also heeding public health advice during the pandemic. And that the money was wrapped up in the 3.2 billion nationally rolled out to councils to support us in doing this, and that everyone in was not its own scheme that would be separately funded. In Greater Manchester, we'd already spent over £6 million on funding our procurement of our own personal protective equipment, as national supplies had been entirely deficient from government stocks and presented a real risk to the sustainability of PPE within the Greater Manchester system. The financial picture for councils across the country is stark. In Salford, COVID-19 has had a projected negative impact on our finances of £58 million. And whilst we've received so far from government 16 million in COVID-19 emergency support, we're also projecting significant shortfalls over the rest of the financial year. Our projected extra costs include 4.3 million in demand for adult social care, supporting care homes, providing PPE and covering increased staffing costs, 4.8 million for children's social care, ensuring foster care placements and support. The council is projected to lose 13 million from business rates, 10.7 million from council tax, 5.1 million from income and fees and charges, and nearly 10 million from Manchester Airport dividend and interest on loan payments. These are significant financial challenges that the local authority faces. We're regularly making returns to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, but I am deeply, deeply concerned about the financial future of local government. And at the beginning of this crisis, government told us they would support us by every means necessary to tackle the budget pressures caused by our response. But unfortunately, these promises have run dry. And once again, we're having to lobby and campaign with limited success to ensure that government takes into account poverty, deprivation when allocating financial support. But where government do inform us of policy changes, things are not actually an awful lot better. On schools, local authorities have been receiving policy changes by press releases and regular updates, especially in the run-up to the 1st of June, with school guidance changing more than 40 times in just over 1 week. I really feel for our head teachers and our governing bodies having to deal with such late information and advice when they're preparing to open schools for children in our city. Government proposals to send all children back to school was completely out of kilter with reality. And in the end, in Salford, our compromise has been to send mainly year 6s back to school, taking a risk-assessed, safety-first approach to schools openings, consulting with the trade unions, the local authority assuring those risk assessments, governing bodies having access to them, and also other relevant stakeholders. At the moment, around 75% of our students or pupils are still isolating at home, or at least they should be spending as much time as possible at home. But what's to stop teenagers from doing a Dominic and breaking the lockdown when our leaders and their advisors seem to be so cavalier with the rules themselves? The disgraceful spectacle of the Prime Minister's chief aide, both breaking lockdown, was a spectacle I imagine few in Britain found edifying to behold. And Professor Neil Ferguson and Dr. Catherine Calderwood before him. Combined with the confusion and arbitrary rules, this has been a recipe for chaos. The Conservatives have prioritised hiring a nanny over being allowed to spend time with your family and loved ones. And in the national context of the economic situation, it's getting much worse. Britain saw its GDP shrink by 20.4% in April alone, a catastrophic figure. Government were recently forced to row back on their plans to introduce employer contributions into the furlough scheme after small businesses threatened mass redundancies. The UK economy, after decades of outsourcing productive industry, privatising the public sector and creating insecure, low-paid employment, is incredibly vulnerable to this global shock. And we look to be one of the worst hit economies in Europe. These are difficult times, indeed, for Salford and for Britain. And we await further government announcements and the fiscal event in July on funding, which will be vital in determining the future of our local authority. Meanwhile, we will continue to respond to the situation as it emerges with the same energy and vigour as we have throughout this crisis. On the 6th of June, and even prior to this date, we lit up the town hall in purple to show our solidarity with the family of George Floyd. And I'd like to thank Councillor August and Councillor Lancaster for all the work that they've done on this. And I look forward to the forthcoming policing consultation, and also the work at a Greater Manchester level to look at race inequalities across Greater Manchester, or structural inequalities more generally as well. Salford councillors and residents can and should be proud of the response this city has made in the face of the greatest peacetime crisis in living memory. We have performed excellently in challenging circumstances, and I'd like to thank all the staff, councillors, partners and residents who have helped to make that possible. You are all the spirit of Salford, but this is not over. The pandemic is still with us and the economic crisis is before us. So we need to strengthen our resolve and continue to work together in the interests of the people of our city. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, City Mayor. Before I put it through for questions, can I ask if there's any questions or any comments that are directed on the speech that has been presented by the City Mayor? keep them specific to that, please. I'm going to be guided by Shan, who has taken a list of people who would like to make comment or ask questions. So, Shan, can you give me the names, please?
Yes, Chair. The first councillor is Councillor Warmisham.
Councillor Warmisham.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm speaking with my Langworthy Ward hat on now. First of all, there's just so many people to thank for what they've done during this COVID-19 crisis in the ward, because, as you know, it's a ward of high deprivation. We've had some real issues, and I just can't thank the people that have been involved enough, from key workers right through to bin men, those getting up fly tipping. What I want to highlight, City Mayor, is Salford Loaves and Fishes. How it's continued to work and diversify and change the way that it's worked to support and deliver to some of our most vulnerable citizens in that area. And I'm sure that you join with me in thanking them. The other issue, of course, is the cladding. It's something that's focused the 3 ward councillors' minds for these last 3 years. I'm pleased that the money's now finally been agreed, but I'm appalled at the time that it's taken and the way that this government have treated us just because it is a PFI scheme. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. And I also have to say, for the record, is that I'm appalled the way that some of the Salford Conservative group have behaved and tried to use the cladding issue as a political football. It was even used in the general election by the Conservative candidate, who was just a fly-by-night, but tried to jump on a bandwagon. And I think it's all really just been to deflect from the government's incompetence when it comes to the cladding issue. I'd be grateful if the City Mayor or Councillor Mayor, who I have to say has been a fantastic support to us as the Langworthy Ward councillors, kept us fully informed of what's been going on. But I'd be grateful if they could inform us as to how the funding will work, and do we have any timescales yet for when the cladding will be replaced and the internal work started and finished. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Warmisham.
Thank you. The next person to speak, Chair, is Councillor Robin Garrido.
Councillor Robin Garrido.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to particularly address my remarks to the cladding situation. And I just pick up, I'm amazed at the comment that Councillor Warmson has just made about Conservatives using this as a political football. We've just heard 20 minutes of the City Mayor using COVID-19 as a political football. How distasteful that is. How distasteful to the people of Salford that the City Mayor can use the virus as a political football. Anyway, I'll leave further comments to my group leader about that, but I really just had to make that clear. In terms of the cladding, the people that have used this as a political football have been the controlling Labour group on this council. It has taken 3 years before the Labour group or the City Mayor has understood that they or that the PFI were responsible for funding the replacements of the cladding. They've eventually realised that and they issued a decision notice some 2 weeks ago, not allowing any discussion on this, the decision notice because it was supposed to be urgent. And yet urgent seems to mean that they can still take their time with getting work started. Can we be quite clear in terms of PFIs? This council used PFIs to replace all the secondary schools in the city. I didn't hear any complaints from them then when they took the money from the PFIs to do that. They used the PFI for the Pendleton developments. I didn't hear any complaints from the Labour Party then, but they took the money for the PFI. And yet now, when they realise, in fact, by doing a PFI, that they have to actually, that the PTO has to actually shell out the money, they start crying that the government should have paid for this. Well, no, The people that did the PFI should have paid for it. They should have paid for it 3 years ago. And the tenants in Salford have been treated abominably, as far as I'm concerned. There are many, many tenants, in fact, that have spoken to me. I have been down, I have spoken to tenants. They've been left with shoddy workmanship in terms of the work that was done. We've had fire doors which have had 2-inch gaps underneath them. We've had windows that are falling out. We've had cladding which has been taken off and not replaced. And all this is being put at the door of the government. Well, it's about time that this council took some responsibility to themselves and agreed, in fact, that had they have raised the money via the PFI to do these repairs, this cladding could have been dealt with 3 years ago. So let's stop all this political footballing. Let's start talking about, how we work together, right? As far as the Conservative government is concerned, they have not once played the political card on every press conference that they've had, on every single day. Not once have they played the political card. I think it's about time that the City Mayor took some lessons from the Conservative government and started to understand the amount of help that has been given to this country and to Salford by the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Robin Garrido. Sian?
Yes, Chair. The next councillor to comment is Councillor Turner.
Councillor Turner, would you like to comment, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'd love to. Well, the City Mayor, he still hasn't got over that terrible defeat in December when Labour were nearly wiped out. He still can't get over it. I looked at the agenda and I thought it was a statement on COVID. And that's what I was prepared to talk about. I was prepared to talk about in some detail of the financial amount of money this government has given. But before I do, we are happy to note the recommendations of the City Mayor and Chief Executive and commend the work of the City Council partners in its entirety as set out on the third bullet point on page 343 of the report. I would also like to pay tribute to the public who have, by their hard work and sacrifice, slowed the spread of this terrible virus. But I would just mention a few figures because I know the City Mayor won't like to mention any figures or any monies that he gets from the government. But I'll just mention a few figures. In this unprecedented support the government has given during this crisis, incidentally, one of the most comprehensive in the world. The job retention scheme, 8.9 million jobs were saved at a cost of 19.6 million. Business interruption scheme loans granted, 47,650, cost 9.6 billion. Small business grant fund, retail hospitality, leisure firms benefiting were 819,000 at a cost of 10 billion. Self-employment income support scheme, 2.6 million claims, value 7.5 billion. Bounce back loans claims approved, 782,000, value 23.8 billion. This government's unprecedented support is one of the most comprehensive in the world. And how dare the City Mayor attack the government under COVID? How dare he? I know it's a political meeting, but quite frankly, I thought that was appalling. The enemy is the virus. And this week we have backed Imperial College London with 40 million in their efforts to produce a vaccine, because it's a vaccine that hopefully will sort this mess out of a virus. It is a terrible thing and we really need a vaccine, and we are not sparing any money in finding one. Now, the other thing, we do note that the CFO is in touch with the Homes Community Local Government Office regarding a projected forecast of a shortfall. This is the correct procedure, and we're pleased that she has taken the procedure. It is advised by CIPFA, and I trust we will be providing a robust evidence to support any claim. The government are aware, and there was a statement in the House which was very favourable, I think the claims have to be in by the 19th, which is this week, and then the government will respond in due course. So my advice to the mayor and his propaganda machine is do not jump to conclusions. Let's wait to see what the outcome is. And if the outcome isn't as what we would like, then's the time you feel free to criticise. But thank you very much. But I am appalled at the actual nature of his attack today under these circumstances. I'm sorry, I didn't realise it was going to be that sort of meeting. I don't like it, but I'm going to have to lump it. But thank you, Chair. And by the way, I think you've chaired the meeting very well.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Just before we move to the next question, there are people that want to ask the question that, is this meeting being time vote? Yes, it is. And we will watch that, and that's our job. Could the members that are using the yellow hands to indicate they'd like to speak just go to the chat box and do it there? We mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting. Can I have the next question, please, Shan?
Yes, it's from Councillor Merry, Chair.
Councillor Merry.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Ceremonial Mayor. Apologise for using your Sunday name. Right. Well, I'm staggered, quite frankly. I don't know if Councillor Turner realises he's not living in North Korea at the moment. The fact is that people are entitled to scrutinise their leadership, as we should be scrutinised as leaders of the City Council. And there is a quite damning case that can be made against the way in which this government has handled the COVID crisis. They were too slow to introduce lockdown. They were too slow to deal with the whole issues of track and trace. They've been too slow in allowing money to come forward for local authorities. And it's hard to escape the conclusion that they have not been terribly competent in the way that they've actually dealt with it. So far from refusing to actually criticise the Prime Minister, when his particular activities affect the interests of the people of Salford, I think that the City Mayor has been absolutely right and correct to take up those issues and to deal with them in that particular way. So I've got no complaints about what the City Mayor has said. I do think it's about holding leaderships to account, and I do think that we're entitled to hold Mr. Johnson to account for the way in which he's damaged the people of Salford. Can I now deal with Councillor Garrido's accusations? Because I'm bound to say Councillor Garrido, in my opinion, has got a nerve, quite frankly. I think there's an old Yiddish word which some of his colleagues may educate him about called chutzpah. And it's about that. It's about having the nerve to actually come forward with a series of propositions and expecting us to believe them. Can I just remind Councillor Garrido and the rest of the City Council, his particular government took almost 9 months to differ and to decide whether or not we were entitled to give aid to the area suffering under the cladding problem, and they eventually decided not only that they couldn't provide any assistance, but they would forbid the council from providing assistance. Since that time, we've worked day and night to put a funding package in place, which actually ensures that the cladding work can be done. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of all the hard work that officers have put in to ensure that that would actually take place. I'm bound to say, if the government had cared more about the welfare of the tenants on those particular blocks than preserving the legalities of the private finance initiative, we could have solved this a lot quicker. We decided that we wanted to loan the money to them. We were refused by his government. And I think he's got a nerve, quite frankly, to come forward with any alternative proposition along those lines. And far from making it a political football on our part, can I just remind him that he organised a interview with a tenant to ensure that his Conservative candidate in the general election got the maximum possible exposure. But the thing that really irritated me, quite frankly, is his complaints that we did not actually allow scrutiny to scrutinise the decision. In other words, what he's actually saying is, could you please, Councillor Merry, slow down the procedures in order that I can complain about how slow it's actually taken. No, I wasn't prepared.
My apologies, 1 minute warning.
Okay, thank you. No, I wasn't prepared to do that. I stand by the decision. I'm delighted that government has finally seen sense, even if our Conservative group can't see sense, and I commend what we've done to the whole of the City Council.
Thank you. At this point in time, the Chair has asked me to just cover for now, temporarily. The next person that will be due to speak would be Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to say is I personally thought that the City Mayor's report was excellent, very comprehensive, highlighting many issues, positive, negative, and particularly highlighting all the good work that has been done by people of this city, helping each other, just proving the old adage that we're all better together. Just like to say a few more words about Councillor Samantha Bellamy. I noticed the work she'd been doing on Facebook. Initially 600 meals a week for needy people in her locality and also veterans, but now I believe that's gone up to about 1,500 meals a week. So I decided to nominate her for High Sheriff of Greater Manchester's Special Award, and there was an awful lot of competition, but I was delighted when I found out that she'd won one of these awards. I think she highlights all that's good in the city and is a very kind-hearted person who is totally selfless and always puts 110% into everything. As well as being a councillor, she's doing all this cooking and looking after 4 children, and she's quite amazing. Thoroughly deserved award. And finally, just to say that she is reliant on continuing this work through voluntary donations. She's had some food donated from some of the supermarkets, but she also needs some more monetary donations. And I believe she has, in fact, put this on Facebook, on her Facebook page. I think it's Love Salford, Love Food. So once again, well done to everybody, but in particular, Councillor Samantha Bellamy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Next question, Sean.
Councillor Reynolds now.
Councillor Gina Reynolds, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to give my condolences to the family and friends of all those who've sadly passed away from COVID-19, and also to the family and friends of all the victims of Grenfell. And I would just like to echo Councillor Merry and Councillor Warmasham's comments in relation to the cladding issues, because I'm afraid it has been an absolute nightmare getting funding to sort this issue. And Councillor Garrido, where do you think we were supposed to get 25 million, over 25 million to sort this issue out after year upon year of austerity? And I'm afraid this government did not allow us to borrow the money. If it had, we'd have got this issue sorted far, far earlier. So I just want to make that point and echo the comments of Councillor Merry and Councillor Warmasham. And hopefully now these residents, their anxiety and stress, and they have suffered, we recognise that, we know what they've been through, that hopefully this will be eased for them now. I'd also like to pay tribute to all our workforce, and not only our workforce, but our residents and the voluntary sector, who have been absolutely amazing during this pandemic. And everyone has gone absolutely over and above. to protect lives. They really have. So I just want to thank all those people that have gone, over and above. But I think the Mayor was right to highlight challenges, because make no mistake, there have been challenges in this city. Our public health team and adult social care team have worked incredibly hard to make sure that PPE has gone into those care homes and to all care providers to protect all our workforce, all our key workers and staff. And, quite frankly, stockpiles have not been built up sufficiently to cope with this pandemic, and we have had to source locally our own supplies. And I thank everybody who's helped with that, from the university to Salford Royal, to the Chinese businesses and other companies. And also we've had challenges with testing. And again, our public health team have been exemplary in managing with other partners and the council to set up within 24 hours our own local testing facility at the AJ Bell. And with that local testing facility, we've been able to increase capacity to have another 100 tests per day taken at that facility. And we've also increased with our pop-up, military-style pop-ups that have gone across the city. And we've been able to, with that testing, to have those tests go to the local lab in Oldham, which has been a particular benefit to us. But I have to say that lab has only got the capacity for 800 tests per day. It's used by other authorities and the North West Ambulance Service. And this is due to a lack of kits and reagents. So we've not been able to increase that capacity further. And if we had, we'd have been able to do far more testing than we currently are. So I do think that needs to be highlighted. But I just want to finish off with saying, the Mayor didn't mention this, but just to say I'm particularly proud that working collaboratively with Unison, Salford Care Organisation and Salford Royal Foundation Trust, the council have been able to provide a local financial offer, what we call the Salford offer, to all our care providers. And this has ensured that any care worker who is unable to work during COVID-19 for whatever reason is going to receive 100% of their normal pay based on actual hours, not contractual hours. And also to ensure...
My apologies, 1 minute warning there.
Okay, thank you. I'll draw to an end now. But on the back of that, we've been able to ensure that we protect care workers' health, pay and employment and protect their families. And I have the utmost respect for our care workers, and I'm really, really pleased that we've been able to offer that because they are really deserving of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Reynolds. Next question, Sean?
That would be from Councillor Nelson, Chair.
Councillor Nelson.
Good morning, colleagues. I just want to start first and foremost in talking a little bit about what Councillor Les Turner and Councillor Robin Garrido was talking about, and I found it quite alienating, sat here in this meeting, listening to about how marvellous the government has been during this crisis from Councillor Turner and Councillor Garrido, when the City Mayor, I think, gave quite an accurate portrayal of what the challenges of leading the city through this crisis has been like, and the associated challenges that the government has laid to us. And I think it's absolutely right to talk about the reality of the situation. And I just think it's a shame I've only heard about how marvellous the government is and not how marvellous the people of Worsley have been in this crisis in helping residents. And I've seen that Councillor Karen Garrido has indicated to speak. So I hope that she can enlighten us on some of the stuff that residents have done in Worsley Ward. I also want to completely associate myself with the comments that the City Mayor made around the tragic loss of Adam Kay. I want to register my thanks and appreciation to my brother and to his friends who were at Clifton Country Park on that day and tried to help him, and I'm exceptionally proud of the response that those young people delivered. I also want to pay tribute and thank the people of Earlham and Cadishead who have acted astoundingly during this crisis, particularly volunteers that were on the production line at one of at the old Talk building in Cadishead, helping to make visors that were being supplied to the NHS. And I think that is an exceptional example of what we can achieve when we come together, and absolutely embodies what the spirit of Salford is. I also want to pay tribute to the staff at the City Council who have been absolutely extraordinary and dealt with the challenges that working from home, and actually an increase in some demand in the council has given them, particularly from my experience, environmental team, and absolutely want to give credit to Councillor David Lancaster and the officers in his department for their extraordinary response during this crisis to more incidents of fly tipping and other waste. So I just want to say thank you to those people and all staff at the council who have dealt with these changes. I also want to pay tribute to the businesses and individuals in Earlham and Cadishead and across Salford who have been making making food and doing shopping for residents, and making sure that during the height of this crisis everyone got the food and other essentials that they needed. And I think the business community and the entrepreneurial spirit of Salford has really shone through this crisis in about social and compassionate enterprising, helping people to get essentials that they need. And I think without that, a lot of people would have been in a really difficult position. So I want to pay tribute to businesses such as Milkade and more in Earlham and Cadishead who have done an extraordinary job, and also the enterprise that Councillor Joan Walsh has been involved in at Princess Park Garden Centre, where volunteers and the cafe there at the garden centre has been providing cooked meals for those who normally work there, the disabled volunteers and other vulnerable people. So I think that's another example of some absolutely extraordinary work that embodies what the Spirit of Salford is all about. And then, of course, I think there's the Spirit of Salford organisation itself, the Spirit of Salford network, the food distribution hub that the City Mayor referred to, the Keeping in Touch service. There was an article in the Manchester Evening News only yesterday about a woman whose life was saved by those volunteers from the CCG, who was speaking to a lady who was in the early stages of sepsis and was encouraged to go. Thank you, Shan. I also want to pay tribute to the schools who I think have dealt with the situation and COVID exceptionally. During this crisis, I became the chair of governors of Fiddler's Lane Primary School in Earlham. So I've seen firsthand, as I know many other councillors will have done, the extremely difficult situation that lots of head teachers and senior leadership teams have been put in, where guidance is sent to them first thing in the morning. They're working through it to meet that guidance, and then more guidance is set by the government at 7 o'clock, 6:30 at night, which makes it extremely difficult for schools to be able to respond. So I want to say thank you to all those. Thank you to the teachers and the support staff and the kitchen staff that have been working throughout the crisis and working to make sure that vulnerable young people who have still been in school are getting the support and the food and everything else that they need from the school environment. And I think that just about sums it up. Thank you.
Who's next to speak? Shan?
Thank you, Chair. It's now Councillor Kelly, Chair.
Councillor Kelly.
Thanks, Chair. My points are just to echo from what the City Mayor said earlier. And my mum used to say a phrase when it was raining, everyone in. And that's not where we are now. With a bed every night, we're now saying that people have to go back out to back to their local authorities. And due to social distancing, as we know, the pandemic is not over. Social distancing doesn't allow us to put some of our rough sleepers and homeless in some of the facilities that Salford have got. There's not enough space. We need the government to rethink this through. So I just want to, say that it's an important decision that they've taken, but it's equally important to our residents of Salford to have somewhere safe to actually live and stay overnight. Just on another thing, I think a lot of people have paid tribute to all our staff and all our volunteers who are all heroes across the whole of the city of Salford. Although I serve in Earlham, lots of things have been going on in my community that we actually thank them all for, and also our local schools. As Lewis said, you know, as a governor of 2 schools, it has been a very difficult time, but I just want to thank all of the people across the city, and the Spirit of Salford Network has been a massive achievement for our city, and we know that we come together in a crisis, and this is certainly a crisis that we will continue to work together collaboratively with our partners. And on that, I just need to also pay tribute to some of our housing providers that have provided some of the temporary accommodation that has been used during this pandemic and will continue to be used. But I'd also like to apologise in some respects for the way that we've had to suspend our housing services and those that are on the housing list. And unfortunately, the housing list, as we know, due to all that's going on with this pandemic, will only increase. So I plead to this government to do more for our homelessness and rough sleepers and our housing situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Sian, who's next?
The next person is Councillor Leitner, Chair.
Councillor Leitner.
Thank you, Chair. I wish to first of all associate myself with all the comments made by colleagues about the volunteering, what the public has done, have come forward. This has really shown you know, the true colours in many of us. I also welcome the huge financial backing that has come from the government in terms of furlough, in grants, in loans. I'm sure that the City Mayor will be writing to the Prime Minister and the Chancellor to personally thank them on behalf of Salford residents. The Mayor speaks about schools and the government telling schools to open for all children. Those were his words, and they are, I think, factually incorrect. The government guidance was to open for nurseries, reception, year 1 and year 6. And instead of supporting schools and helping those children go back who wanted to and who could do, less than 50% of Salford schools reopened on the 1st of June, as per the government's guidance. Councillor Mary spoke of scrutiny and the right to scrutinise the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's PA, but our job here is to scrutinise and to run this city. And I think it's disgraceful there's been no children's scrutiny committee for 4 months now, and with education and with children at the forefront, and their education is at risk here. I was hoping that the City Mayor could assure me that going forward we will be able to meet and have regular updates and assure that our children get the education they need. I mean, it's for the City Mayor to denounce our right to have a PA to help scrutinise the council, but at the same time to refuse the children's scrutiny to panel to scrutinise and to look into the education. That Councillor Merry, that's the real chutzpah.
Thank you, Councillor Littner. Sian?
Chair, it's now Councillor Edwards.
Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, sorry. Is that better?
That's better.
Sounds better. Right, okay. I just want to start off by thanking the amazing people in Morton South that have done more than amazing things, because actually just staying at home and keeping safe is a heroic act at this moment in time. But the people I want to mention in particular, there's a long list, so I'll go through it as quickly as I can, is firstly Reverend Karen Owen and St Mary's Church in Ellenbrook, who were out delivering food that was supposed to be going to restaurants from a supplier to people that needed it. And what we've got to remember, I think, in this crisis is that need looks very different. And actually, I'm aware of someone in my ward whose son from London got in contact because his mum that he normally organises a food parcel for needed food. Now, they're not short of money, but she was short of food because of the crisis. So things have really, the world has changed, I think, in a way that I don't think any of us expected. I want to thank Worsley College for donating all of their PPE, which got distributed to our care workers, and Buell Hill High School, whose site manager and science department donated full body suits and science goggles. Argyll North West in Walkden, they donated technologies to allow for streaming of funerals at Agecroft Crem, so as many people as possible could grieve in this difficult time. Price's Bakers donated so many sandwiches and cakes to care homes, and I've also enjoyed their sandwiches during lockdown, so thank you to them for being brilliant at making bakery goods. Gemma Fish and Henry Hill, who set up Walkden Step Into Action and Walkden Coronavirus Mutual Aid, and I can't put into words the work that they have done, the amazing things that they have done to support our community at this time, and I've done everything I can to help those two, but they're just incredible. Gemma runs a pub in Yorkshire, and she's obviously not doing that now and has given all of her time to the community, and Henry's balancing that with working at Salford Royal, so brilliant work, Gemma and Henry. Spirit of Salford, I want to mention Stuart, Christine, Peter, Claire, Carl, Joel, John, Jake and Dave, who work for Citywide, who are running and distributing food boxes and now creating food to distribute with Sammy to people that need it. The Health Improvement Team, Little Holt and Big Local, who have been shopping for people throughout the crisis, and all the key workers and essential workers and people that have just done what they do all the time, but actually have kept our country going. It's incredible. I think we have to mention and appreciate the tragic loss that our community is facing this crisis. It's saddening, the amount of people that we've lost. And the amount of people that are grieving, and I think it is going to take a long time for us to recover from this. And I also want to pay my tributes to Adam Kay and his family and echo the words of Councillor Nelson in the young people from Salford, Kyle, Ollie and Ollie, who actually in that moment risked their own lives in order to save someone else. And, you know, but all four of those people, Adam, Kyle, Ollie and Ollie, are young people, and they didn't think about anything but saving Adam in that moment, so I want to pay tribute to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Can I say that we've already heard from 10 people asking questions, making comments, so if you're still coming up, please make them succinct, and if they're going to repeat things that other people have said, you know, well, you don't have to spend too much time on that, just let us know that you would agree with what's already being said. Shan.
Thank you, Chair. We now have 7 people in our list waiting to speak, and the next councillor is Councillor Saunders.
Councillor Saunders.
Hi, thanks. A couple of points, I'll whiz through them, as you said, Chair, for time. Firstly, I too would like to pay tribute to all the local people, councillors, council workers, NHS, etc., particularly volunteers. I'm not going to go through the names, we've heard them. Unfortunately, the Labour Party can't bring themselves to say a good word about the government, but I will pay tribute to all the work that the council has done. I particularly want to say that the Jewish community, local Jewish community, are very grateful for all the help that the council have given to the Jewish community. That's been really appreciated. And I also want to pay tribute to the Jewish community themselves, who have really rallied round, not just in Salford, but throughout Greater Manchester as well. Sadly, a lot of Jewish people died, a lot of people in my ward, Kersal. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with them, and condolences to their families. Thankfully, and thank God, it's much better now. I particularly want to thank the Council Registrar's Department, who have actually been amazing in facilitating funerals, literally sometimes the same day, in accordance with Jewish and Muslim law and custom, something that I didn't think would be possible under the circumstances, but was. So well done for that. My colleagues mentioned education. I would certainly urge schools to open as quickly as possible. I understand that there are challenges but I would certainly urge everybody to do as much as they possibly can. I note the Mayor mentioned discussions with the unions. I think a Conservative minister referred to those as asking permission from the unions. Now, in terms of the, I just want to come to, again, my colleague mentioned scrutiny and political assistance. We talked about the PFI. I don't tire of mentioning that PFI came in at a time of a Labour government and was used by many Labour councils and encouraged by Labour government. And it's interesting that the council and the Mayor want to deny as a political assistant. The Mayor makes very overtly political speeches, which he's fully entitled to do, and all we want is, it's not a matter of gaining seats, as one councillor put in the chat. We want to do our duty by our constituents, and we feel that we would be able to do that better with a researcher. After all, most councillors are working people, to have a researcher, and if we save money for our constituents by challenging the Mayor and the ruling group, then the researcher will have earned his or her money several times over. And I think finally, Chair, I just want to complement what my colleague and leader, Councillor Turner, said about the amount of help the government has given. And yes, I do welcome the U-turn on school meals, and yes, I accept the government has made mistakes. We all make mistakes, but I think the government should be given kudos for being prepared to do U-turns, and well done to Marcus Rashford, fantastic Manchester United player. But nobody mentions the fact that the government did give the school vouchers without question during the Easter and the Whitsun break. And just finally, as I said, to mention some local figures which we happen to have got, even without the benefit of a researcher. I've got the breakdown of constituencies for furloughed people, and I've crunched the numbers myself without a researcher, and Salford and Eccles is the 7th highest constituency outside London. Blakely and Broughton is the 11th highest, and in the entire north of England, Salford and Eccles is 2nd, Blakely and Broughton is 3rd, only behind Manchester Central. And a quick, almost back of the envelope, actually did it on the calculator figure, 35,000 people in total, and that, by the way, is dividing Blakely and Broughton by 2/7, because we've got 2 of the 7 wards, gets a total of about 35,000 people altogether, which is just under 15% of the entire population of the city of Salford, and that's men, women and children. And the help that's been given to self-employed people as well, I've got the figures, I won't bore you with them, but many thousands of people have been helped by the government here in the city of Salford through that scheme, and will continue to do so. And by the way, Councillor Simon Clark of the Local Government Association has paid tribute this week to the government for agreeing to look again at council spending. So yes, we might be out of pocket at the moment. I believe councils have been asked to give proper spending returns, and I am certain that the government will look very, very favourably indeed in reimbursing councils. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Sean, how many people do we have on the list to ask questions?
We have 7. Still have 7.
Can we close questions then? The reason I say close questions because the City Mayor has got to respond to these, and I think if we're having another 7 questions, we'll probably have run out of questions that could be asked. So can I have the next one on the list, please?
Yes, it's Councillor Antrobus, Chair.
Councillor Antrobus.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to take the opportunity to welcome the City Mayor's statement. A lot has been said about political football during this meeting, but I think there is an acknowledgement that the best political football has been played by Marcus Rashford, and I very much welcome the City Mayor's endorsement of Marcus Rashford's campaign, and indeed Gary Neville, the owner of Salford City FC, has also praised the work of Marcus Rashford. What is ironic, of course, is that it has taken this 22-year-old lad from Manchester to tell the government what campaigners throughout the country already knew, that they were wrong in their decision. And right until the very last minute, right until they'd scrutinised the opinion polls, only then did they make their cynical U-turn. I don't give them any credit, as Councillor Saunders suggests. I think it was a very, very mean-spirited and reluctant move that they made. And the fact that the Health Secretary even managed to get Marcus Rashford's name wrong when praising him for the work that he'd done only added to the irony. So I think it's great that the Mayor has been able to praise Marcus Rashford and, by implication, of course, criticise the government, which the opposition say we should not do. I find it extraordinary. It is the supreme irony that this meeting started by the Conservatives arguing that they should spend council taxpayers' money to have researchers to enable them to criticise the City Mayor, and then they've spent the rest of the money saying we don't want to discuss the government's attitude to the pandemic. That would be party political, that we don't want any criticism of the government. Mr. Mayor, those attitudes are the mindset of people who have a penchant for the totalitarian aspects of life. Either that, or they're so ashamed of their government that they just don't want to discuss them.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Sean, who's next?
It's now Councillor Jones, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Thanks, Chair. Jeremy Hunt, the Conservative Member of Parliament, was in charge of the Health Service for 6 years between 2012 and 2018, and now he chairs the House of Commons Health Committee. What he received last month, on the 11th of June, let me get it right. On the 11th of June, the Health Committee met and they had a report from the National Audit Office. And what that report said was that 25,000 hospital patients were discharged into care homes without testing from National Health Service hospitals. That report also said that the government failed to heed the advice to build up stocks of PPE. So Jeremy Hunt, when he heard that evidence, he said it is extraordinary that no one in government appeared to consider the risk to care homes of transferring patients from hospitals to care homes without coronavirus checks. Now that comes from the former Secretary of State for Health, and it's a damning indictment of what government advice did at that time. Now the question I've got for the City Mayor, which I'd like him to think about if he can't answer today, is that if we've got 43 care homes in Salford, there or thereabouts, I think Salford Council should set up an independent inquiry to find out what happened over the last 3 or 4 months in those 43 care homes and ask them to give either written or verbal evidence so that we can at least then send that to government so it's quite clear what has gone on. And does the City Mayor realise that if he goes back 30 or 40 years, most care homes in the country, a lot of them, let's say, rather than most of them, a lot of them were run by local authorities, and yet now very few are. And dare I say, because they are not run by local authorities, standards have slipped, pay has reduced considerably, and we're in this situation where care homes have struggled on the staffing side to give what they want. And yet those care home staff on the lowest wages have put themselves at massive risk in order to care for the patient. So they do deserve a medal from everybody. They've been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Sean, Councillor King has just indicated that he wanted to ask a question some time ago. Do you have Councillor King on the list?
I'm sorry, I don't. I can check with my colleagues. The person that I have down next is Councillor Karen Garrido. You may to take that.
It was a common chair.
Can we take Councillor Karen Garrido first, please?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ceremonial Mayor. I just have a couple of comments and I've got a question. I'm absolutely horrified to listen today and to watch on the chat the absolute austerity, the absolute hatred of the Conservatives, which is happening. I just want to remind everybody, and I'm not going to go through the figures, but I know that this government has done its best. And its hindsight is very good to look at. And I know that we should be waiting until the end to see what the government is actually going to do with the local government money that they require. I find it appalling, Mr. Mayor, to sit here today. Thank goodness we're not in a full council meeting, that we are at home and feel a bit more protected. I'm very, very annoyed and very upset about what has been said today. I'm not going to single out one person or one group of people. Everybody in this city has stood up and been counted. Everybody has helped everybody. And there has been nobody that's wanted any help that's actually been refused any help. I'm shielding. I've got to shield. I've been told I've got to do another 2 weeks. So I'm unable to go out. But I will do all I can and to support everybody. And I just feel, right, that for the Mayor to mention the Prime Minister in the way that he did. Yes, he did had COVID and he was very, very seriously ill. He was in hospital. And I think he was at death's door, if I'm very honest, but he pulled through. So how you can say that he didn't look after the country while he was in there? He was ill. You know, Mr. Mayor, what it's like to have this COVID. You've had it. Probably not as seriously as, and I'm not saying that it's not serious to have COVID. And we all know people that's got COVID and had COVID and are very seriously ill, right? You cannot blame the Prime Minister, right, who unfortunately was not there, right, but he's done all he can. And sometimes it's nice to say you're sorry, like we've done over the school meals. We've done our U-turn. I hate the word U-turn. We've listened to what people have said, but I don't hear Starmer saying that. I don't hear him moving that would happen in Parliament. But I just find it absolutely incredible that we're carrying on the way that we are today. We should be looking. This is a pandemic we're in. It's never happened in my lifetime, and I don't think it's happened in anybody else's lifetime. This is so serious. You know, we're asking people, and people have abided, as was said, about staying in and keeping the distances. People are sitting on the green, but they're keeping their distance. It's only the young people who think that they are immortal and they're not. It's not going to affect them. And I find it really, really difficult. Our nursing homes have done their best. They are working so hard. Our care people are absolutely, absolutely fantastic. I cannot thank them enough for looking after our elderly. And it's very sad that we can't go and visit our elderly, or we can't see our grandchildren, or we can't see our family. But we know that we're doing it, I think, for the good of everybody. We're not selfish. We may be Conservatives, and I'm very proud of our government in this time that what they've done. All right, you make mistakes. I accept that you make mistakes. But to keep going on about it and for not even having the decency to accept that we have actually given some money to Salford. And like Councillor Kelly said, we do need to look after our homeless, and we do need to look after the people who are rough sleepers. And I hope that the government does reconsider and look at that as well. But we need to be all together. And I find today, I'm not a parasite. I'm not somebody who's evil. I'm Karen Garrido, and I work very, very hard like everybody else. And I'm really sorry, but I just find this absolutely appalling. And people who are putting it in chat, right, need to be very careful, because I expect the monitoring officer to look at these comments afterwards, because this is not acceptable. In this society, in the middle of a pandemic, this is not acceptable. But my question is to Councillor, is to the City Mayor. Considering we've got the 1 metre or 2 metre rule, whatever it'll end up with, have we been looking at other places within the city that our schools can actually use to extend into because of this distancing, which we all know is going to be here for a while? So I wonder whether our education department has actually been looking at areas, and whether they've actually come up with places that they can do. I'll just look at my notes to see if there's anything else. Just everybody's the same on scrutiny. Yes, we do need to scrutinise. So can we get these scrutiny committees? I've been asking for ages for these scrutiny committees to be looked at, and hopefully we will start. But are we going to have the normal recess in July? Because if we are, they won't be starting until towards the end of August. But I'd just like to say I'm sorry about the tone today. I'm sorry that everybody feels that it's right just to actually have a go at the Conservatives, because we have done a lot. And as local Conservatives, we work very hard in our communities. You are not the only ones, right? You are not the only ones that are working within their community. I know how much hard work everybody's doing. And I don't single out anybody within my group, right, or within your group. I just feel that we're all pulling together. And the spirit of Salford is actually the community. And the community has worked very, very hard to actually keep everybody going. Shopping, I get my shopping done for me by my neighbour, because I'm not allowed to go into shops. And I know that councillors have been doing shopping for me as well. So I'd like to thank everybody that's worked so hard. And can I say, Mr. Mayor, thank you for running this meeting so well, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Garrido. Sian?
We now have Councillor Hines, and what I would propose, subject to your agreement, Chair, is that Councillor King is added onto the list now at the point where we receive notification as officers. I've checked with my colleagues, and none of the officers appear to have notification that Councillor King wanted to speak, but he is now on the list.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I want first of all to thank everyone. Much has been said, by the way, that and I got in late because my chat box was playing up, but nevertheless, I'm in now. First of all, I want to thank all the staff and all the people that have worked hard in this pandemic. Once again, local government has showed it's in the vanguard. It's there when a crisis hits. Who's there? Local government. And I want to thank all our staff for all that they have done. Now, Karen Garrido then said about some things in chat. Well, the real problem, Karen, is we've had 10 years of crisis, austerity, cuts. And that has been made blatantly clear now during this crisis. The health service was on its knees. It's remarkable what they've done over the last 3 months. Remarkable. The staff that are in there, many of them underpaid, they've really shown their true spirit and whatever they've done. And the crisis was there for 10 years as the health service has been cut. Now, of course, we've said about the government and the monies that they put it in. Yes, they have put a lot of money in, but what else could they have done? You know, the crisis is there. They had to do something. The real problem will be as we come out of the crisis and who pays for it. Local government, as Paul, the mayor, has said, local government were in dire straits, quite frankly. You know, £38 million probably in the red as we go through this year. Something has got to be done. We are making returns. I hope that you're right, that government does come to our aid. They need to do, because we really are in trouble. Much has been said. I know time's short now, so I'll cut it at that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hines. Sian?
Thank you. The next elected member is to speak is Councillor Kamal.
Councillor Kamal. Hello.
My apologies.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll be brief. In the response to COVID report, it mentions a couple of the schemes that have been put in place to help make walking and cycling safer in Salford. We've protected a cycle lane on Liverpool Street through the industrial estate from Albion Way into the city centre. We've put barriers up on Irwell Street in the city centre and Blackfriars Street as well to enable pedestrians to socially distance and to protect cyclists. And there's a lot more preparation work which is going on at the moment, and we're expecting some good news in the very near future. More funding from Greater Manchester Combined Authority. There's been a lot of work been put into these schemes that we're yet to be confirmed, but the officers have been working really hard, so I just wanted to say thank you to them. I'd like to urge all of us that can to walk or cycle for local journeys. A third of all journeys across Greater Manchester that are less than 1 kilometre in distance are made by car. So a 1k journey is a 5-minute bike ride or a 10-minute walk for most people. And as more people start to return to work, we need to keep the buses and the trams free for those who have no alternative. We need to try and ensure that we do not return to gridlock at rush hours. Walking and cycling is very good for you. It's good for your physical health, your mental health. It reduces congestion and pollution. It can be quicker, especially at rush hour, and it gives you a lot more connection with your surroundings. I'm sure everybody's noticed all the extra bird song since the traffic has died down a lot with lockdown. And it also frees up the space on the buses and trams, as I said before, for those who have no alternative. So I would just like to urge the citizens of Salford, if you can, get on your bike. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kendall. Sian?
Thank you, Chair. It's now the opportunity for Councillor Jolly to speak.
Councillor Jolly.
Jolly.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. I'm having to use Mr. Chair, I'm having to use two pieces of technology because the sound is dicky on the laptop, and I think they just interfered with each other. If you could hear a feedback there. I just want to confine my remarks to scrutiny, as that's been raised. I could mention a load of other things, but I'll not do that for speed. Yeah, scrutiny is trying to get back now into its normal mode with online meetings. We have met as an overview and scrutiny board unofficial meeting. We met right at the beginning of April. That was the first Teams meeting that many of us have been to, and we've had 2 more meetings since. Those have been unofficial meetings. The scrutiny chairs have also attended 2 cabinet briefings. Some scrutiny committees have also had unofficial and informal meetings so far, just briefing meetings. But we did agree right at that first meeting not to have anything formal at all, really throughout April and into May, because that was the height of the crisis and everybody was fully engaged at officer and lead member level in responding to the crisis. We're now, I think, getting to a position where we can get back to online proper scrutiny meetings, and after discussions, I've had discussions in the last week with the Mayor, Jim Taylor and Debbie Brown for my committee, that chairs are being asked to meet as soon as they can with lead members and chief officers, appropriate ones, to put together new revised work plans and then get on with meetings as soon as we can. What they do with meetings over the summer is up to them to discuss when they're going to meet, but we want to get back to that. I have also been to one meeting of a GMCA scrutiny committee last week, which was them just, again, trying to get back into scrutiny. So they're in pretty much the same position of us, if not a bit behind. I'll also say that there have been 2 meetings in the last couple of months of the North West Scrutiny Network, which officers have attended, where they've been discussing where things stand across the northwest of England. And frankly, from that, most authorities are in the same position as us, that they are just getting back to meetings. Some of them haven't had meetings at all. Some of them have been going to cabinet briefings at chair level like we have. So in reality, we're probably ahead of where most authorities are, and we're certainly not behind them. So it is we want to get back to doing proper scrutiny as soon as possible, given all the difficulties. But it's not the executive denying scrutiny, because it's not their job to do that. But it is the technical and issues with the crisis that we're now trying to return to scrutiny as we can. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jolie. Shan?
Now it's Councillor Collinson's opportunity to speak, Chair.
Councillor Collinson. Hello, we can see you. We can hear you.
You can see me, okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just really going back on Councillor Karen Garrido's comments. I really wanted to reiterate everything that she had said. In Ellenbrook, Boostown and Ellenbrook, a support group was set up at the very early stages by myself, a local resident, and the vicar of our local church in Ellenbrook. They've done amazing work, and they were up and running very quickly, seeking advice from CVS regarding GDPR, making sure that all the volunteers had identity badges and keeping everybody safe. But all our residents have been extremely appreciative of everything that they've been done. I'm saying this because although it wasn't directly commented on, the inference was that we weren't doing anything in our wards, and that is far from the case. We've all been working very, very hard to support our residents. And on another point, I think most of the Conservative group, the councillors, have put their names forward to do anything that might be needed to be done. If some of our councillors have been shielding, they're still at the end of the phone, they could still have spoken to people.
Can I bring in a point of information, please?
Point of information? City Mayor.
Can colleagues see me?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard now on this call a number of times by members of the council, predominantly the opposition, where it's been referenced that I've not thanked councillors, or the inference is somehow that, you know, Conservative councillors in the city of Salford have not been, you know, contributing to the effort in the city. I don't know what the issue is here, but a number of times in my address to full council today, I made it absolutely clear that all councillors, and that includes members of the opposition, have been involved in their own ways, many of which I probably will never know about, in supporting the efforts of the city. So I just want to correct the record, because it's been mentioned now several times, and I'm getting a little upset sat here listening to it, because actually in my speech, I deliberately talk about all residents, all councillors. I was not being party political in terms of the efforts of the city. So if we can just correct the record, that would be appreciated.
Thank you, City Mayor. Councillor Collinson.
Yes, just to continue on from that, a number of the Conservative councillors, through having underlying health conditions, have had to be shielded during this period of time. But all of us, I think, put ourselves forward to be available to speak to residents or to help with anything that might be needed to be done. And nobody from the council has contacted us at any time to say that our help was needed. I just really wanted to make that point. We've all been doing our own work and helping residents as best we can in our own way, but it's not through lack of putting ourselves forward. We have been putting ourselves forward to help, but nobody has contacted us. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calderson. Sean?
Chair, the final person, elected member listed to speak now is Councillor King.
Councillor King, hello.
Hello, City Mayor. Sorry, I seem to be on a different chat box from everyone else. I did put my request in much earlier, so I don't know what's happening. Technology maybe have let us down a little bit here, I'm afraid. Just a fairly brief comment on a couple of items. The City Mayor did mention the fantastic work being done by both employees and various other workers and volunteers. One small volunteering effort we've had in the Cliff area where you and I live, Ceremonial Mayor, a local neighbour organised a collection for baskets of fruit and chocolates and bickies to be delivered to local carers in the many local care homes we have in our area. And sadly, some of those have passed away. Some of the elderly people in our care homes did die. And when we did our clap for carers on Thursday evenings for so many weeks, we were clapping for sometimes the poorest paid in our society. And when it comes to levelling up, then I hope that the government don't forget those real heroes who have been on the front line, very often putting their own lives in danger, and some of them sadly did indeed succumb to the virus. And I'll tell you who we were not clapping for. We were not clapping for the oligarchs on their yachts or the billionaires in their castles. We were clapping for the very often poorest paid people in our society, and they should not be forgotten when all of this is over and when it comes to dishing out the rewards that society produces. I mentioned about, sadly, some people passing away, and I think that was probably down to lack of PPE. I do want to comment on that very briefly, if I may. Because of the manufacturing base of our nation has been hollowed out over many decades, especially during the 80s and 90s, we just don't simply have the manufacturing capacity even to manufacture PPE anymore. And we had the very embarrassing episode, and this would be embarrassing whichever government was in place, because we just simply didn't have the PPE in store, it seems to me. So we had to source it from overseas. And we had the embarrassing episode of sending a cargo plane off to Turkey to pick up thousands of items of PPE, only to find that it wasn't the appropriate equipment and had to be sent back. What I would suggest, therefore, for government is to think a little bit more about maybe onshoring some of our, re-onshoring some of our manufacturing capacity, especially for goods that are absolutely necessary, as this pandemic has pointed out to us. And because our supply lines are now so long, we can no longer, I think, rely on equipment coming from India or China or somewhere else. Because at a time of crisis, people do buckle down and look after their own citizens and their own communities. And that has been proven to some degree with this when the President of the United States tried to buy out a manufacturing organization in Germany, for example, and that the goods should be exclusively exported to the United States. So we need, I think, advice for government, Tory councillors, is to try and re-onshore some of our manufacturing capacity for some essential goods. There was another byproduct of the pandemic. We had a meeting with the Climate Action Board or forum recently, and we saw that the levels of pollution in the city is down by about 25 or 30% or so, as chaired by Councillor Antrobus recently. And I think this is another example. We should try and hold on to that reduction in pollution, especially in the inner city area where all the cars come in from the M602 and down the A580 down Berry New Road. And when they get into that part, the eastern part of our city, they slow down and they belch out all these fumes into the lungs of our young children in schools and so on. And maybe we should look at having a green growth strategy from the government, which would have a double positive impact. A, it would grow our economy with green jobs, and B, it would reduce the levels of pollution. So there are some suggestions from me, Tory councillors, to take to your government. And I think they're positive suggestions to take away. So thank you very much, Chair. And well done for chairing this meeting, by the way, in very difficult times.
Thank you, Councillor King. before I hand back over to the City Mayor to give a response, can I just point out to everybody we have 20 minutes before we get to 12:30, and we would need somebody to propose and second to extend the meeting by 15 minutes. I mention this now because I don't want to interrupt or interfere with any response the City Mayor is about to offer. So,
move it.
Second.
Move extend.
Fabulous. Can I hand over to the City Mayor again for a response?
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got, I think, 19 questions in total to respond to, so I'll try and get through them as quick as I possibly can. First of all, Councillor Warmisham, congratulations on becoming a trustee for Loaves and Fishes, and like you, I'd like to place on record my thanks and appreciation for the amazing work that institution in our city has been doing. And that is even before the pandemic struck this country. You know, Loaves and Fishes have been doing amazing work supporting some of our most vulnerable people in the city. So absolutely, and congratulations in becoming a trustee. In terms of the point you made about cladding, and I know Councillor Merry followed this up in his comments as well that he raised, I do agree with you. I think, you know, during the general election, the Conservative Party did turn this into a political football, which is terribly unfortunate. What I have to say is, you know, we moved, I think we were one of the first local authorities in the country to move with regards to publicly announcing to the press, to the nation's press and media, to remove and replace the non-compliant ACM cladding on those 9 blocks in Pendleton. And unfortunately, even after an emergency full council meeting, which I know members of the opposition were in attendance at, the government didn't allow us to pursue the £25 million loan because it was a private finance initiative. I just want to correct the record as well, because I noticed Councillor Saunders talked about PFI being a new Labour initiative, and, you know, not wanting to rewrite history, but I just want to remind colleagues that PFI was brought about in 1992 by Norman Lamont at the time. It was not a new Labour initiative. So I just think it's important that we don't rewrite history at this full council meeting and acknowledge the facts of the situation. Moving on to Councillor Garrido's comments and, you know, his concern around the politics of this full council meeting. I think, first of all, I'd like to just say we have been briefing the Leader of the Opposition and chairs of scrutiny through our cabinet briefing protocol with regards to the city councils and the city's response to COVID-19. And I think it was Councillor Jolly who stated earlier that there have already been 2 briefings. This has been the only opportunity I and members of the mayoral team and also members of this council have had to actually talk about the politics of the situation. So I make no apology for trying to strike a balance between celebrating the amazing work of the city of Salford and the spirit of our city, which does involve the Conservative opposition councillors as well, in their own ways supporting their communities, their residents, absolutely. But I think it's really important, if we're to do justice to the public office we all hold, that we reflect on the politics of the situation and actually talk about that. And when Councillor Garrido talks about, you know, me not thanking the government enough for the financial help and support it has made, I just want to draw colleagues' attention to the fact that we've had 10 years of austerity up until this point, which in my opinion has compromised our preparedness and has compromised our resilience moving forward as a local authority. And I think that can be said for local authorities up and down the country. But when we talk about money coming from the Conservative government, I think it's important we acknowledge this is not necessarily money we actually have. This is the national deficit and ultimately the national debt we're talking about that has obviously made money available to support individuals, families, households, communities at this exceptionally difficult time. And I'm going to be watching with great intrigue and interest on how government expect the nation to pay back this money. because I'm absolutely determined that the people who are the most vulnerable in society and the poorest in society, acknowledging that Salford is the 18th most deprived local authority in the country, according to the government's own index of multiple deprivation, should not and absolutely must not pay for this crisis. So this is an issue yet to be resolved, but I think it's important we acknowledge this is money we've borrowed, and this is added to the national debt and deficit, and there is a decision in the future, or decisions in the plural in the future, to decide who is actually going to bear the brunt of paying for this crisis. And I'm committed, and I'm sure members of this chamber are committed, to making sure it's not the most vulnerable and the poorest in society that end up paying. Thank you, Councillor Turner, for your comments about the work of the City Council and partners in the city. You're absolutely right. I think the people of Salford, the institutions, our own members of staff and the councillors have done an amazing job, you know, and I certainly couldn't have done what we've done without all of you and without everyone in the city of Salford. I do absolutely acknowledge the support that government has made around job retention, self-employment, bounce back loans, and I also acknowledge the role that local government has played in administering a lot of this work in a very short space of time. So I certainly pay credit to Debbie Brown's team as well for all the amazing work she's done in supporting businesses in our city. You are right in highlighting it is a comprehensive package from the government. And as I said earlier, this is adding to the national debt and obviously the national deficit. And yes, we are making returns to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, and our CFO is overseeing that process. But I would remind Councillor Turner that it was the Secretary of State for MHCLG that started to change the language and the narrative about local authorities sharing the burden. Sharing what burden? We've had 10 years of austerity. We're currently projecting, you know, a £38 million overspend by the end of the year. What does that actually mean? Are you saying we need to cut more jobs, cut more services to the people of the city of Salford? We are right to be concerned about local government financing. And I know in the press today, you know, Tory councils are warning that a second wave of coronavirus could bankrupt them. This is the county council network of 39 English local authorities. Need I say any more? Councillor Mary, thanks for reminding us that we're not living in North Korea, and politics is actually important, especially at this time when significant decisions are being made at a national level which have profound consequences for people here in the city of Salford and for some of our most vulnerable people. I totally agree with your comments. I think the government was too slow to lock down, too slow to track and trace, too slow in terms of the support made available to local government. And it does raise questions about their competency as a government. And it is incumbent upon us in local government to hold the government to account. Part of our role, in my opinion, is making the residents of this city aware of what we're having to deal with. So I make no excuses for doing that. Thank you also for highlighting the issues around cladding and the general election and how it was turned into a political football, unfortunately. And also thanks for highlighting the situation with regards to scrutiny more recently, with regards to the decision to get on with securing this financial package and removing and replacing the cladding as quick as possible. Councillor Fletcher, thanks for your positive comments. You're absolutely right. We are all better together. And thanks also for doing what you did with regards to the work of Councillor Bellamy. I think she's been doing a fantastic job, and I'm sure she'll be delighted with the High Sheriff's Award that you've nominated her for. But as I said earlier, you know, there's many people who will never know what their contributions have been during this pandemic, and we should always be cognizant of that. Thanks also to Councillor Reynolds as well for your comments with regards to obviously our condolences with people who've lost loved ones at this time, and also on Grenfell. I know you've been working tirelessly along with Councillor Warmisham to try and find a solution for residents in Pendleton. So thanks for those comments. And thanks for the tribute you paid to the workforce and everyone. There are significant challenges, and I agree with the points you made about the stockpiling of PPE not being replaced and all the testing challenges I know you've been dealing with as a lead member in this space, working with our colleagues in public health, adult social care and children services. So, you know, I just want to say thanks for that. And also thanks for highlighting, it was remiss of me for not to mention that we've signed the Unison Charter around care workers, and we've ensured that they now receive 100% of normal pay based on contractual hours. However, I do think there's a lot more work to be done in that space to make sure all of our care workers at least earn the real living wage moving forward, being mindful that we haven't had a green paper, and at the moment looking at local government finances without central government support, that will be something we will struggle to deliver. So again, more lobbying and campaigning, I think, in terms of the future around all of that. Councillor Nelson, thanks for your comments as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry you feel alienated, because, you know, I share your thoughts, really. The government hasn't been marvellous. Yes, they've made mistakes. Yes, they've helped in places. You're absolutely right. But I think we should acknowledge this and learn from this and move forward. And also, I think you've heard from other Conservative colleagues that, you know, they did reference the residents in Worsley and work that's being done there. So they've responded to the point you raised. Thanks also for raising the point about your brother and his friends who helped in the tragic situation with Adam Kay. I was aware of that, and you did make me aware of that. I think it was via social media, actually, as a direct message on Twitter at the time. But thanks for reminding us that. And I'd just like to pay tribute to all those individuals involved in trying to save Adam's life. And it must be really tough for those young people at this time as well. And thanks also for sharing with us all the great work that's been going on in Earlham and Cadishead, as well as across the city. Councillor Kelly, you're absolutely right. At the moment, we've managed to find £4.75 million within Greater Manchester to continue a Bed Every Night Phase 3. Government, as you know, have set up a Rough Sleepers task force, but we're not out of the woods in terms of secure, sustainable financing to ensure that we've got Bed Every Night, which is COVID compliant, i.e. putting safety of people first into the future. So we'll continue to lobby government around all of this. Inevitably, it might get caught up in the July fiscal event, but also we'll lobby around the comprehensive spending review and local government fair funding review. Councillor Leitner, again, like yourself, I pay tribute to all the people in the Salford who've done amazing work. Also, I thank the government for its furlough grants, supporting individuals at this time. In terms of writing publicly to actually thank the Prime Minister, I think I'll consider that with members of the mayoral team, whether or not we need to do that. In terms of schools being open for all children, you're absolutely right to pick me up on that point, and it was nurseries, reception, year 1 and year 6, so well spotted on that. In terms of the approach we're taking, just to reassure you, you talked about scrutiny urgently needing to meet. The Leader of the Opposition and the Chair of Finance and Accounts and Audit has been coming to COVID-19 briefings of the Cabinet, where, you know, these sorts of matters and issues have been discussed and raised and questions have been asked. Just to be clear on the City Council's position to the opening of schools, it's about a safety first approach and a risk assessed approach. And I'm absolutely committed to that approach here in the City of Salford. We should be putting the safety of our children and their families and their loved ones first and foremost in all of this. The pandemic, the virus is still with us. We are concerned about a potential second spike, so ensuring a safety first and a risk-based approach to school opening is absolutely the right approach for us to take. And I'm sure Councillor Merry would be delighted to receive any questions or concerns you may have with regards to the approach the City Council is taking. Councillor Edwards, thanks for all your comments about what's been going on in your ward in Walkden. I mean, some of those organisations and businesses sound like they're doing an amazing job. And like you, I'd like to pay thanks and tribute to all of them. You did name the 4 individuals that tried to save Adam Kay's life. You said it was Adam, Kyle, Ollie and Ollie. And like you, even though I didn't know them personally, you know, my thoughts and my prayers are certainly with all of those at this time. Councillor Saunders, thanks for your comments about the support that the Jewish community in the City of Salford has received. I know Councillor Merry has been on regular calls trying to work through issues and concerns pertaining to the Jewish community during this crisis. And thanks also for your kind comments about the council registrar's department here at the City Council, who I think you said have been amazing in terms of supporting the Jewish community and the Muslim community in the city with their cultural requirements around same-day funerals. So that's really appreciative. And like you, I think our officers are amazing and they're doing a great job in very difficult times. I won't respond to the point you made on schools because I think I've made it clear what the City Council's position is. I've also corrected the record on PFI being introduced by Norman Lamont in 1992. You did talk about a political assistant in your comments to me, and I just want to reiterate the points made by Councillor Merry. Our position is that the opposition considered using their own councillor allowances to actually pay for your political assistant, because that is what the Labour group do. Rather than using taxpayers' money, why not use your own allowances to do what we do and pay for your political assistant? Maybe that's something you can take away and have a think about, but I'll leave that with you all. As I say, we will have to consider our position if you do pursue the appointment of a political assistant. I'm really delighted to hear what you had to say about local government financing and that you're optimistic about government reimbursing councils. So that's great news. If the opposition would like to issue a public letter to your government to ensure that happens, that all of our costs and loss of income will be reimbursed as a consequence of the impact of COVID-19, I'd be delightful if you could do that, and I'd happily, retweet it or draw attention to it publicly. So I'll leave that one with you. Councillor Antrobus, thanks for your comments on Marcus Rashford. I think I'm with you on all of this. One thing I know about the current government is they look at opinion polls very carefully and very closely to almost decide what government policy is from one day to the next. So, although I'm glad government have done a U-turn on this, I think it's the right thing to do. It'll be interesting to see if this is maintained in perpetuity into the future for all of our young children who are reliant on free school meals. I think the figure is something like 1.3 million. But with the economic impact of COVID-19, I'm really concerned about what happens to that number into the future. It's the moral and ethical right thing to do at the end of the day. This isn't about politics. This is about making sure all young people in our country have food on the table and have a nutritious meal. That's critical for their child's development, and it's critical that we continue, irrespective of which political party we're a member of, to fight for that basic human right as far as I'm concerned. Councillor Jones, thanks for making reference to the report. I do have a copy of it just so you can see from the National Audit Office. Like yourself, I was horrified when I heard 25,000 people had been transferred into care homes without testing, and the government had failed to advise on the build-up of stock of PPE. So, I'm really, really concerned about all of this. And I think we need to consider the National Audit Office's report seriously with a view to then considering what our position is here in Salford with regards to whether or not we pursue an independent inquiry here in the city of Salford around all of this. Your points around care homes are very well made. My mum actually works in a care home. Unfortunately, she's been furloughed because of her age and her underlying health conditions at the moment, but she is due to go back to work very soon. And I'm very aware that many care homes were obviously in local government control at one point in the past or under the state and have been subsequently privatised. And that privatisation, I think, has a lot to answer for in terms of standards, in terms of the efficacy of delivery, and in terms of, where we find ourselves at the moment with regards to how we finance care homes moving forward. Councillor Garrido, thanks again for your comments. Just to reassure you, I know that members of the opposition in the city of Salford have been working hard and tirelessly to support our residents and our communities at this time. Even when you're shielded, you've been there to help and support people. So please don't think this is a personal attack on you as individuals. This is more about the government's response to the pandemic. It's in no way me questioning what you have or have not done. And more to the point, you know, you're not answerable to me as an individual about what you do in the city of Salford in terms of representing and supporting your residents. So, you know, I wouldn't actually expect members of the opposition to tell me what they've been doing. I only know what I know. In terms of the question you asked around schools and whether or not we'll consider other areas of the city with regards to accommodating further school openings, I think that's a matter for Councillor Merry and the risk-based approach he's taking as lead member in this space. So I'm sure Councillor Merry will be delighted to get back to you in terms of where all of this is up to. Just to remind colleagues, all of this is done in consultation with trade unions, with governing bodies, with head teachers, and all those risk assessments we're receiving are being assured by the City Council, and obviously build on the advice of the Director of Public Health. So I'd just like to leave those comments with colleagues. I think Councillor Hines, you're absolutely right to highlight the issue of 10 years of austerity and how in many respects that could be argued to have hampered our preparedness for this global pandemic and resilience as well as a local authority. You're absolutely right to highlight who is going to pay for this and how is it going to be paid. And I think we need to watch those developments really, really closely. I mean, I've already heard the Chancellor talking about, you know, looking at the triple lock on pensions and other mechanisms such as employment taxation to pay for the increased borrowing the government has done over this time. I think, Councillor Kamel, you make some really good points. I mean, last night I had the privilege of going for a cycle ride with yourself along with Councillor Antrobus and Councillor Sharp, and I saw some of those cycle lanes that we've recently put in place to encourage more cycling and walking in the city. I think one of the things we've certainly learned from this pandemic is how much people enjoy the outdoors, our green spaces, our walkways, our cycleways, and I can only see that becoming a continued priority for the city. Sorry,
my apologies for interrupting City Mayor and Ceremonial Mayor. I'm just mindful that we've now come almost to our 3-hour time period under Rule 12 of our Council Procedural Rules. We still have items in relation to presentation of long service awards and date of future meetings. And I was wondering whether the Ceremonial Mayor would now like to seek any objections to formally extending the meeting to deal with those matters. My apologies for interrupting.
We've already done that. We've got an additional 15 minutes as in the Constitution that's been seconded and before we started the Mayor's chat. So we've got 10 minutes left. That will take us up to the time that has been agreed, which will be 1:45.
So there are no objections to that then. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that point. My apologies for interrupting.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Councillor Kamel, as well for highlighting to residents of Salford to get on their bike. I thought that was an interesting way to end your comment. We do need to cycle and walk more. It's good for our health and well-being. And if we can start doing that and keep cars off our roads, that would be fantastic. Councillor Jolly, thanks for your comments on scrutiny. Clearly, a lot of work has been going on there, and I think it was important for the record of Council that you highlighted all of that. And can I just pay my thanks and appreciation to yourself and also all the chairs of scrutiny. You've been doing a great job at this time, and I look forward to collaborating with you further, obviously, into this new municipal year. Councillor Collinson, thanks for your comments around what's been happening in Boothstown and Ellenbrook and all the great work that's been going on there with the support of Salford CVS, especially around the implications of GDPR. Like yourself, I'm really appreciative of what all of our residents are doing in every single ward of the city. So my thanks and my appreciation to you and everyone involved there. Councillor King, this is finally, I've got to the end at last. Can I just say thanks for all your comments in terms of supporting employees and people involved in the effort during this pandemic. Like yourself, I am concerned about care workers and the people we've been clapping on Thursday evenings. You mustn't forget that there was scheduled to be a green paper which has still never arrived on how we actually look at the future of social care, which would involve obviously how we remunerate our care workers. There's also going to be a fair funding review for local government. I'm told there's a fiscal event happening in July, so next month, by the government. Whether care workers and the people we clap on Thursday evenings will be on that fiscal agenda, I don't know, but we'll wait with great optimism off the back of what Councillor Saunders has just told us about, local government financing. But I just want to remind colleagues, 10 years of cuts in local government doesn't put us in a great position in terms of our preparedness to try and sort out some of these problems. We need fair funding. We need to make sure all of our care workers in the city of Salford are at least paid the living wage, the real living wage I'm talking about there, not the Mickey Mouse sort of George Osborne minimum wage, which is often confused with the real living wage. And I also, support your comments around the future of manufacturing, and you'll be aware that we now have a national industrial strategy, and a green growth strategy is being increasingly talked about. What this means in reality and practice is yet to be seen. But absolutely, we need to get into that space of how do we create sustainable jobs that puts UK PLC and our national economy on the front foot in terms of recovering from this global pandemic. So with all of that, I'd like to thank colleagues for your questions, your comments, and I hope I've done you justice by answering all of them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, City Mayor, for that very thorough presentation and questioning. So thank you, colleagues. Before we go on to the next agenda item, we're asked to note the Mayor's report. Do I have a proposal?
Yeah, proposed, Councillor Dawson.
Thank you. Seconder?
Yeah, Councillor Walsh. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's noted. Item number 12 relates to the presentation of long-term service awards to Councillor Robin Garrido, and former Councillor Val Burgoyne. So the Council is asked to note of the intent to make these retrospective awards at an appropriate ceremony to formally do this. We will hold it as soon as it is practicable due to the current social distancing regulations. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Agreed.
Item number 13, dates of future meetings. You should have a list at the end of your minutes for the council that details these dates. Agreed?
Agreed.
Wonderful. Just before I close this meeting, I'd like to make 2 points. One, Sean, can I ask you to go through to the different chief whips of the different political parties and just make sure that people understand what the chat box should be used for, because a lot of the things that come through in the chat box, as you've indicated, is just not appropriate. And the second thing, can I remind councillors that nobody comes into politics for an ego trip. And the one thing that we shouldn't do is expect any of our colleagues, the 60 of our colleagues, to leave any council meeting feeling rejected or feeling bullied. And I just ask the colleagues from both political parties to keep that in their minds the next time they have a council meeting. Thank you, Sian.
Yes, thank you, Ceremonial Mayor, through you. The chat box function, as set out in the guidance that was provided to members, provides that the chat should be kept to an absolute minimum and used entirely in relation to the business discussed, really just to let officers know that an elected member wants to ask a question and make a comment. It's just so that we can make sure that everybody gets the opportunity to speak in a fair and transparent way, and that everybody gets an opportunity to speak in the right order and that nobody's missed. It just becomes administratively more complicated if there's a loss of information. Then it's just easy to miss somebody. And Councillor King, obviously, I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but that's an example of how something can get missed. So it's just for that bare minimum, for the purposes of asking questions and comments.
Thank you, Sian. Thank you. Right, the business is concluded, so I need to declare this meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.